those cards, John. I saw it. The first cards, the two easy cards, the last two are short linear cards.
Yeah, I don't know NEG. Which is weird. He's in the 7th. I'm sure he is.
You put that into the file. My working folder. Sure. Yeah. All right. Okay. Okay. Oh, okay. Good. So, I'm gonna write more stuff on here. Stuff here. And then whenever they break it, if there's something there's okay, cool. Go for that one. Put the ball in the hoop. Don't fuck it up. Give me down cool with me. Let's get it. Yeah. Okie dokie. Have fun. Don't talk to strangers. Stay better. Good luck, folks. Good luck, Kansas.
Thank you.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Went to the other hallway and there's Jeffersonian 1, 3, and 4.
Yeah,
What the
doesn't-
fuck is going on? God bless you.
Your extension. Or actually, just hold on here. Actually, probably. It's enough.
Does anyone have an extra red pen that can go around?
I didn't want.
Oh, excellent. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Here, whenever you need it.
Can I borrow some paper as well? Pretty please. Thank you so much.
I'm just happy I got that.
Thank you. I've never done
David, what's your email? I have it somewhere about this.
Griffith D 2002 at Gmail.
Let's fix it up.
This is Pearl. First I thought, honestly, that it was my wrong mistake. Oh, yeah, I changed that.
It should be something. Is that right? 3 minutes. Sorry. Do you,
Cards.
also settling causing extinction during 2020 by investigating one of the representing extermination laws, violation of laws, the loss of teaching, education, manufacturing, including the species, diversity of species, property, medicine, knowledge, injury, the inversion of causes, no regulation, of play, point the fuck out of human knowledge, and diversity, disease, vectors, and then extreme weather, human economic survival accidents, about human safety, being resource, the curse unrealistic. The U.S. is key to global biodiversity and staying below the impact of loss in 19 no longer to pursuing important system capacity of the society delay. Marvel as it doesn't be far away from the potential to really important the word. The search for a solution for the divided world of central species being hit on the hardest miss. The burden at the heart of reality is a system of what fire to represent part of include what is the survival of preserve report of the species, one of the world's greatest. The center of biodiversity of those species and spend time later. The escape of lost species stuff. The find safe fisheries, fish wars cause extinction, curb and 17 fish ward of the conflict of Africa, so America. Never find about species of conflict started on border super border. Make it more resources or stress, no peace, no people, instability increases. No scarcity, food conflict is recovered while the nuclear escalate. Number of resources is likely nuclear is possible. Microturbo loss causes human extinction locked in 75. Nurse taken maintaining microturbo social members ecosystem control methods. The safety disease pest mitigation is no microturbo. This is essential to ecoservices of all later intersecting the indicated health and disposal. Will the pest control birds are necessary for the lively civilization extinction causes this irreversible damage. Standings not add item lawsuits for anything non-human. Simply lets their interests be represented in court proceedings and judicial validity started in 1960. The big benefit is the environmental litigation litigating everything. Not to go to party litigation person. Yes, they will not be all that. The question is standing to be heard out or standing in organization, either of a litigated environment issue standing. We have such a personal injury. This sort of pointing guardian out of effort when national system of the alter to court. You should be standing in court of self then asks whether plaintiff the connection to local issue standing in absence of injury. In fact, almost all small suits would probably fail, but standing unchecked third party representation from judicial political backlash. And then I think nature require representation that the third party standing organization running legal action never meets requirement any court consider rights and every right to opinion court. National organization right to opinion over politicization of backlash legal members would benefit natural entity would avoid the contest politicization national organization would be supported but need the sole plaintiff given the nature legal right to go to court. The curses will not allow those in the nature family person not auto standing for nature suit required to demonstrate statement. The injury traceability reversibility requirement for very expensive discourage because that's the challenges prevent the court from being overruled, open the door to lawsuits for deposition would be redress to litigation. Political denial of standing imperils the few most necessary lawsuits where nature's would outweigh economic balancing solved by diversity. The city's plaintiff frequently take up a decision not accident able to adjudicate other. There's that abstentions or no sort of parts of the court from the hearing. And that's a court find a plaintiff like a standing down, standing could close the door. In other cases, the lower court and this will believe for litigants and nature could next to the court of appeals outside the third party. We'll step in the threshold of evidence across the edge of the court is according to one of public nature. Nor take the court for the part of the face of barriers in the court. The situation has real consequence under that situation and breaking extinction. Only affected by activists. The seek relief successful lawsuits result in paying a penalty instructively made in compliance with the law. These may be limited nature like when nature is going to test against economic issues that include, for example, a stream granting access to a court is the only way. Political activist denial of standing stems from human interest being unable to outweigh development in injunction balancing woodward attempt. And then organization secret should be having a standing more not a one general however the human standing is doing its own right that human advocate for. The wildlife board is hardly also the status quo. Injury and balancing work consider harm. In case of to defend the scope of nature connection court, not just understanding because of finding scope of harm standard and keep nature activists on every gender. The plaintiff not have the standing and lose the case without the judgment interest on the matter. The human plaintiff got out with defendant interest on the balance. Human emotional justice. Nature be what against $1 million loss of development. The other and wildlife is part of the plaintiff's harm. He's going to be diverted. Nor balancing with judges of reputation to building river. Then extinction court additional way. The plaintiff's skill remains. Human injury cases are winning now, but are too small to solve biodiversity. Puts bird fish in jeopardy backlog. And then 10 need to particularly injured leading discover large find individual connection to harm. 36 standing to a lawyer's basis. It makes it impossible to address. The broad harm standing make it generalized. The bar standing justice to another litigation critical part of that. There's a plaintiffs unless courts are satisfied with their injury harm. Will magnify nature is the subject of litigation. The militia for the injury will extend their ecosystem like by the way. The effects which kind of irreversible harm and litigation stem from loss of ID at the global level. The plaintiffs' stocks will fail. Plaintiffs will be restricted to challenge and permit violations. So the small ecosystem standing is the effective middle ground. It's also with advantages later 2200. You could about not only have ecosystem the smaller amount of involved. High standing prevented suits and losses of the ecosystem rather than individually. Norm of the individual will often decide in favor against second precedent. These such judges will not be ruling strictly with the political preference of conservative judges in favor of rights or so on. That's plaintiff prove harm 70% Ecuador. The suit succeeded a person they take permit. Rights will not be applicable. We use the resource survival diversity using overusing US police on such a less availability. So for people around the world, that's the United States should best legal legal rights in nature to be named in and have injury weight and lawsuits advantage to his injury. Standing is actually high now for human injury, but fails not merits because organizations shoehorn human interests into success should be about nature. But that had little sense in any universal purposes of protection group this year. The government consultation of the small number of watching. The book of illusion of issues of research, the associating acts and injury affect me. The one that lost its action with the worst one ecosystem of the station of health and self-sustaining group. Whilst affidavit stating, but they were watchers unlike the major organization. We go to court to protect interests. The email was suggested the database backwards to go to court and eliminate injury flow to court. It's not realistic of the group's planted limited resource and probability issue strategic organization ever. Towards the most prevalent violation of the law, rather than injury effect also is a lunch violation of its existing law, even when there's little except of restrictions on injury effect. This also to the court reconcile standing uncertainty risk arbitrary over enforcement of the easiest human injuries. The proof instead of the case is best for a portion of law. The 10 aesthetic and environmental injury expending issues go to proxies, danger over enforcement interview of those who conduct lawful that face suits private party bring action compliance defendants to arbitrary law. The groups that go to court and lobby unleash evidential litigation. The suit manufacturing issues go lying in court. The designated laws on the watch federal statute such as your told no conduct can have numerous many reform limit plaintiff who can sue people for energy. They should be sitting organization to be able to join the suit. Bring them on behalf of the insurance commission of violation of the treat the member by legal search speed all complicated because intended for. There's just ascertaining amorphous injury practice that led for example to the hard court. The relating to legitimate prevent party from manufacturing law. It will be weaponized to undermine Bureau of Land Management leasing under NEG naked said all. The city group contended stating because below 91 increase the member of harm aesthetic interest. No, the levy of the retract leases will allowed to be able to pay. No, like the common effect money more local aesthetic. The two generalized service and injury standing aesthetic is short term the government injury nation of before leasing to the noise and even no longer run below local issue standing of course. Injury in fact not fiction. Coal is locked in now, but Bureau of Land Management coal leasing regulates high sulfur coal under the CA leasing requirements low and 16 coal fire plants are cornerstone of nation power. Even an offset making renewable coal that larger from 2035 energy leases not affect future coal consumption issue. The leases will reduce dependence on foreign energy storage by the local sulfur coal. The plants and NDT and offer leases unlike the reserve control company. The best heavily coal generated non averse the demand existing plants will continue to operate on an increasing demand over the life of leases. High sulfur coal causes extinction and triggers sun to make a coal set. 16. The sun is entirely natural, taking this to be the running sulfur-related coal to colony issues, better colony more temperature. The coal of fossil fuel is surrounded with the sulfur membrane. Volcanic eruption material sulfate as our access to the sulfate is going on. The separate found unmade foods to drive back and forth sulfate. Only low times essentially the pulse of motor. Catastrophic gradual sun to cause extinction noise her and 22 access to total. Caused by sulfate with electric on the complete feedback loop partly sun of negative effect on my ozone, increasing the danger and radiation due to the casting ag ego implication deal. And then food protection will be studied society exposed word. This that's food development and history of days such as food dynamically. This spread season violent conflict in acid rain extinction COVID 21 the virus civilization consume millions of coal vast alpha legend chemical the sulfur toxin that causes acid rain on the acid variation of lectures toxicity from the activity equivalent to effect of food sulfur dioxide black carbon the pure water causes disease worse homicide in history BLM leasing certainty is key to oil and gas industry solve U.S. energy dependence will see we're going to BLM leasing produces the predictability the gas certainty of critical barriers to investment the withdrawal leases capital development producing capital allocating amount producer residential security decision then does increase the cost of investment the conduct of new or unusual risk lease to harm national security production of gas reduces dependency on reduces South America on the US on federal lending the certainty of investment improve security overtaking Russia China 40% of the gas which produce not federal uncertainty but heavy productions American independence solves global energy wars at Grand 1930 first American resources security market American hydrocarbon status away Grand security continue China and India consider the US an ally dominance and church away the US would do whatever so China the Russian money protecting power use again leverage with organizations around it words such as women's employed push for nation self-sufficiency the African emerging threat African Korea SES American the kind of friendship and friends and foes energy wars and transition conflict go nuclear into independent solves clear 20 role of petroleum geopolitical essential security research European American party nations the control of expansion of the independent domestic export national the conflict hardly district conflict global energy gender political roles and like conflict North Africa supplies SNE CSN the Arctic green transition carbon imagine with conflict free this possible country perverted orders passively the thing worse than that's nature standing solves by mitigating political pressure then avoiding human interrupting the Carter and then Congress passes century predicate injury species worth not none of the such procedures are very social protected or separate from nor with injury to convey standing any ensuring me best factor but mitigate political pressure does not go with standing political to prove injury causation redress and overcome errors and fight the court however the injury convey standing will do the environment Congress attempt to protect trees by courts on enforcement and ensure the trees versus the citizens understanding what issue violation convey standing in relation to incidental injury to right versus enforcement out of political basis and litigate in the name of the resource. I'm going to read the other impacts unless you want me to read.
Sure.
The binding. Go back to the first advantage. Fish schooling patterns unlock collective human intelligence from nature links, also seeking this opportunity issue teacher mitigation for to complete such as to come together to start the thing. The flock of fish each fish sets its food predator excited have different preferred direction of the collective aggregate and collective problem makes there's not have a solution because nature solved and total example fish beneficial from human group letter from nature collective intelligence from a nuclear pandemic research or something actors intersect next is what a number of actors suffering nature communities these natures.
Did you part of the doc?
Yeah, it is. It's gang.
And Samber.
Did you finish?
Okay. Yeah, gotcha. You good? Okay. After the plan, what changes the way that lawsuits are brought against the Bureau of Land Management?
John can actually just.
They would be under nature's injury justifications instead of human, because litigants would be more likely to win.
Wait, you've read evidence that says that they're winning now because of overly broad standing requirements. Why would they change the way that they're litigating?
because one, they have limited resources, which is Barnum, and two is that nature's injury allows them to like be.
But the 1AC just run a bunch of cards that's like if they do that, they're gonna lose. They're already winning. Why do they need to change their strategy?
Okay, so two things. One, when you say they're winning, it's not like they're doing things that are good for the environment. They're just hurting businesses because they're winning small suits about like aesthetics.
I don't care
and
why they're
recreational
winning. I'm
interests.
asking you why they changed their litigation
okay,
strategy.
so I think like big thesis is like you are correct that they're winning now. The thesis of the AFF is the wins right now are too small because they're based on aesthetic interests, which is why it does not solve the biodiversity advantage. Post-plan, the suits that they want to win are the suits that are killing and making like fish and other animals go extinct, and so they would shift to try and win bigger suits. The balancing test means that it creates certainty for industries, but not all, but enough to solve the.
So what part of the mandate of the plan do you think accomplishes what the push shot evidence advocates for when it says that we should abandon injury and fact requirements?
When it says that we should like weigh nature's interest against the economic interest of fracking. So the mandate of the plan is like allow them to be weighed.
The mandate of the plan just allows nature to be named and have its injury weighed in lawsuits. I'm very confused where you think you've read a piece of evidence.
Yeah, so this
that causes the United States court, which has been strictly adhered to in the context of Article 3 for about 45 years now.
Oh, well, we
Something will
agree
change
about
what it
that.
thinks.
We definitely agree about that. But this dives down a little bit of a loophole in standing law, which is the theory of injury in fact is that you have to have like a concrete particularized injury to a human. The plan obviously changes that.
Well,
if it allows
it changes the
nature's
human
injury.
element of that. Why do you think that accomplishes allowing people to bring lawsuits in a way that forces judges to focus on objective
The
harm?
Carter card clarifies that allowing nature's interest would mean that judges can make a predictable determination and get rid of the political pressure and political ideas that surround cases right now.
The one that's from like the JD candidate from 2009. Why is that about like the current Supreme Court?
Well, I mean, I sort of disagree. I think they're making like a broad claim about how not just the Supreme Court, but judges across the nation make determinations across lawsuits and have said that it would decrease political pressure and political ideas when it comes to environmental litigation.
Okay. In the world of the plan, I'm a bit confused about the nature of lawsuits. Who exactly are people suing to protect nature's interests? Is it agencies? Is it private actors? Is it businesses?
Wait, are you asking who brings the suits or who
I'm asking
are they
who's
suing?
getting sued.
Who's getting sued?
Yeah.
Oh, it could be like businesses and agencies.
Businesses and agencies. Okay. All right. I think we're good.
1, 8 rights advantage, injury advantage. Let me know when everyone's good. Everyone has it?
One moment.
Okay.
I'll let you know.
Got it.
Okay, I'm good to go.
Everyone's good? Rights of nature destroy the setting doctrine of urban setting limits on the litigants and power to assume that constitutional minimum requires personal injury traceable on level conduct not clear justice general grievances and not be standing unless the plaintiff can establish concrete personal injury is not the Supreme Court one has said nature that happen and that politicized the judiciary push us in universal standing women can possibly the next constitutional power which requires that every time right or government judiciary which are able to transform into a branch of the general set by choice of right that a case in article 3 passionate interest on the nature of how that can solve over standing lawsuits manufactured by special interest groups or law being forced on as made over watchdog extinction that's what 21 the U.S. embracing governmental laws and that with the American heritage remains the U.S. and the world on the Republicans deliberate and the horrific consequences of flow breakdown rule block considered for Eastern Iran governance requires that the judiciary center rights and the violate any problems need to address including warming poverty home healthcare revolution artificially domestic extinction refugees and matters of peace and peace and our security there must be application of command the rule of law the necessary and sequel that's broad around it and the judiciary must be well paid so they get applied law without fear and critique the affirmative vesting of rights in nature fails to limit the state's sovereign power and so we use to justify environmentally destructive forms of neoliberal governmentality Valderas and Valdez 19 a complex thinking about nature's rights and the military battles and the roads and nature rights war and the right rights battle on the right around means nature, supposed human beings, the most important part of nature rights are good as sovereign power, culture, culture, social security, economic benefits, necessary to use explanation or state and improve from the disciplinary powers that are boundaries of our rights and find and find what point this is demanding that any person has right to represent nature, especially the state, so you can have nature according to the definition and their naturalist approach to trust rights of nation, the balance of mainstream environmentalism, which normalize ideologies that guarantee environmental destruction and political domination. Hammond 21. Through action in environmental politics and international culture, boundaries and critics and towards political sources, the environmental politics as a targeted realization of our material approach to environmental politics, and the political discussion and the role of ideology driving environmental destruction and even industrial trying to translate and national level targets and special structures that will within environmental politics and the natural problem that predestines environmental politics remain within nature environmentalism. Thus, we endorse a multidimensional analysis of the AFF. The goal of this framework is to create a liberatory environmentally capable environmentality capable of producing viable alternatives and challenging dominant ideology. Flex 20 analytical framework goes in the foundation for analyzing environmental governance for granting the government formations of framework for the understanding of complex and miscommunications utility find a foundation for discussion rather than whether categories of best aftermath or goal management politics or support initiatives that challenge on order. Our game of most of champion right decision making and egalitarian factual counterpoint. The United States should grant nature a right to be named in and have injury weighted lawsuits originating in lower courts while denying standing on appeal on the grounds that doing so requires the appointment of a special fact-finding magistrate prior to the resolution of factual standing disputes and the presentation of evidence of standing at the earliest possible opportunity. The counterpoint revokes the ability of appellate courts out of fact-finders and standing disputes that solves that allow standing on appeal decisions. Watermouth and Davidson on the fact-finding for justice and power justice and prevail with standing appeal judgment and should show the opportunity standing over additional level necessary to the parties and parties action this and then have a court address handle not defensive facts and setting focusing on a case and also addressing them well to have a conflict and the court that can address and where issues are factual or appears the factual speech of it within one issues the whole court is not local to handle the whole court and the issue don't be reconciling evidence between an expert fact finder determining what courts about sending issues on the law to straightforward of the setting sense because the factual speech should be referred to naturally judged and determining standing on appeal cause unjustified agency decision making. Gosh 15 how to find access rate resources and strong increase workload adverse effects and level from level and hard discovery no discovery no processing credit. I can't be waiting without a procedural state part of the whole course and they cannot have actual disputes and often accuracy data from chargeable bias for the administrative state agency ready to record most able takers and follow court with rule one favor him trying to ensure review problem is one is look outside the agency record fact finding and follow courts that frees agency to change course that more from the new individuals by the decision agencies must explain independent decisions excess deference normalizes regulatory dysfunction and inhibits response to every side of threat. Only the counterclaim makes agency policy making effective at Shannon Shanks 23 irregularity facility for regulatory dysfunction that agency courses that agency courses that these responsibilities remains in short pathways and international administrative law research treatment all the regulatory policy making process and expressive action for people free to work with uses that taking the new for that representing renewable agencies and organized one mission dominating agencies focus on structures well as that agency function and checks from Congress from courts or weekend administrative courts or similar to other agencies and other courts and regular policy making with opportunities to gather up people experts and oversee public and legal consider policies that might agency effectiveness and official research allocation against the guidance on its outcomes lack of problem should say legitimacy by authority and accountability filming on the fees and version of four branch agencies that several also credit decision should not apply best effect and ordinary rationality or non-compliance to dysfunctional policy making and all regulatory policy making stuff that policy making unfairly associated with other procedures undermine viable solutions that saddle problems that ideals constraints development and never presume normality in our core federal misuse. Requires right then. What T subsets rights individuals are plural requiring more than one, and the Oxford 22 denying more than one, and one denies the entire item. Oxford 22 denying about more. Of your about number of items, and the plan gives one right or duty to one NEG, but NEG is key limits the ground, forcing wholesale change, creates unique links on large scale action, and avoids tiny subsets with no generics, and console counterplan denies on internet in a prior binding consultation with a digit strives concerning where object legal rights and nature to be named, and named in and have injury weight in lawsuits allowing for modification of the policy to suit indigenous interests, or in the good tribe's veto power, and the negotiations fail, and abiding with the outcome of the consultation, only prior consultation solved, third, couples the law from indigenous interest, making it a neutral colonization. Page 21. Arguing rights and recording rights and equitable obligations that person as neutral colonization, decouple indigenous relationships and obligations of the environment, rest and nature, compromise, often the right rights and deforestation, the answer is not personhood, and the answer is uniquely called indigenous communities and give a central role management of whatever rights not for the deforestation, that shows also the side of these person of expectation remains right, and the nature of second interconnection between rights and nature, deforestation, conservation, is key to our prior implementation, and nature rights are never held in nature. Purge 22 out of the person of national needs and possible that it have or responsibilities absurd and responsibility would involve in creating the contracts and the would not be the river and the woman's whole claim rights and not qualifies as a possible version of rights for that you can have interest sufficient for capacity to hold it. Claim rights and not claims and not insist on the rights interest of resources and it's not about a place of offense or interference under their treatment. We can also think of we can interpret having minimal experiences or recognition of claims on the claim that goods like found in expect rights and explanation is not on some other good assuming legal person requires capacity to hold it. Claim rights can be home while they have a stake in holding to them and then they can only say being something to take that from underneath time has to go first. The question is who they do their minds duties and although neg for political limits and the other interpreted towards topic literature to artificially favor the app and their negative recourse and PCD counterplan. The United States should recognize natural resources within the federal public trust and open standing for natural persons and establishing the public trust auction compels an affirmative duty of maintenance and protection of public trust resources, part of investing legal rights in nature be named and have injury weight in lawsuits on the grounds that it requires the public courts to make factual standing determinations without the ability to remand fact finding. Deny standing to groups suing the Bureau of Land Management over the leasing practices under the Clean Air Act and it's all about manages since 21 other bringing into humans and internal line and public doctrine and recognizes that the same special obligation and resources all branches are originally accountable for the trust review process action and corporate restoration and conduct local harmony and matters that are being fed by obligation of the doctrine right and tax possible and doctrine of restrictions of our property at the level of the public and not also maintain a better extension of the producing house who by person who never property law and the office of more certain paths the same goals and holds this at the Supreme Court will uphold loan forgiveness because of strict injury fact where Robinson and Gold one letter path and the body has stopped using loan forgiveness maintained on the Supreme Court as having crisis or party for another or be critical of the tribal and majority set holding the fairness power and they don't give that issue there's standing funny and competent that's in will on the rights of the setting seem to I be greater hurdle than the body of those sources to there's an appetite and a loss estimate stands at 24 again it's auto saying 23 Supreme Court's decision over seeing loan forgiveness and it's running on over showing there's some party showing out a key part about key binds I can see when the president says it'll get better that's not all people feel we needed loan forgiveness and it's not going to happen there was a particular sense of binding and the family struggle we're talking about for rest of our I want to see that in action. We can't see it. We can't see a process and down extinction. There are 3 other reason the future of return for policy after person will improve our rights at the same time around long as that has been aggression by Russia, Ukraine, China, North Korea, Asia, America, these leaders who can meaningfully get presidential knowledge of the implementations of our power plants and global system with nuclear weapons have ever would fail to improve remote society ever can take out place in a nuclear bomb from the blue and state policy would be accepted by multiple system failures that can be considered a significant WD 24 medal and undermine America Wilson failures to combat and we are down reversal America versus Canadian mobile nuclear and rights and energy fish wars as 18 and the most merit that Russian increase body cover organized or no resource requires the means of all the field of regulation non condition or widespread misapprehension social rights and periods of high price shares and sources that contain our more complex little structures and land corruption other forms of economic problems over its impact remake grade 18 and the bodies 11 and part of actions threshold and that are not connected to Western or on the local observations there's 11 priorities and finding local substance fees for losses and never evidence on the new forecasting loss fees possible but it's suffering loss of all or have a like central data donation or solution that found to become more circular and talking and find boundaries are recognizing it. I mean, these ones that and then the government side and our forecast of warming and 16 and then little branches and then more benefits of the complex for issues and reducing GHG emissions that's more little branches are more than have adjustments of areas and coordination of combination of planets and establish on the setting stop recording corporate or moving explain that unfortunately not having to look explain that anything and approved by common evidence that the defendant cause of harm. State officials were refused to enforce and exhibit injury damage coverage screens requires particular concrete injury in fact Robert 27 requires injury factor requires it also creates the camp by for requirements and necessitates actual injury all the frequencies necessary not sufficient requires that for harm and rights direct correct and lawful insufficient concrete plan is that definitely being supposed to that having harm requires that must actually exist so there must be or real harm. The plan has to change human injury requirements and if lawsuits win now they'll just bring the same suits. The internal link is not SRM on Nicholson 16 let's termination as former purchase and access to coordinating actions would it and allowing these things to be great and part of the tier 22 and interior health city bill and climate threshold action on knowing gas will connect robust and harmful reach and recommended important modernization of the bill soil and gas program and no aspirin
read the energy
and energy hits high and Newman 37 experts in the record more than Rocker Saudi and imports was not seen this is the 50th production moment yes less lower gets energy weapon and technical one energy hits the best number we import and fuel because cheaper markets are cost and hits the traffic 30 for years of factors to go up and markets yet again net export more for net exporter yeah I'll go back
Status.
Status quo is always an option.
Good points.
Yeah.
The fact-finding counter or the fact-stripping counterpoint. Okay. So I want to make sure the counterplan or the part that it says like fact-finding would like no longer happen. I guess is it for all litigants?
Well, to be clear, we don't say that fact-finding won't happen. We
Or
say
you
that
can appeal.
fact-finding won't happen in appellate courts. It will be done by an appointed fact-finding magistrate that is specifically appointed for the role.
Do the does the counterplan fiat that they're appointed?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you create a new court about nature because there's not an administrative court for nature right now?
What are you talking about? Like, there is, the EPA has an administrative tribunal that our evidence is actually talking about when it refers to the ability of appellate courts to hear cases brought from administrative
So
courts.
post-plan, all nature suits would go through the EPA's appellate court.
No,
Then
just some of them.
Just some.
Yeah.
How is that sufficient to solve?
Well, no, post-plan. Post-counterplan, no. Post-counterplan, all suits must first have fact-finding done by a specially appointed magistrate. In the status quo and post-AFF, it allows for people to try to enforce lawsuits against administrative agencies in their own tribunals and in Article 1 courts, which we've read evidence that is bad.
Okay. The Channing Shanks card, I've read this card like 3 times. It's like Kentucky nonsense. I don't even think it makes an impact claim. What, like a line that like says an impact. Just like I don't even know what impact defense rating it's racing.
Big talk from Kansas, but
Dude, you're
policy
out of
making
dodge.
unfairly associated with suspect procedures undermine valuable solutions to societal problems.
What societal problem?
Emerging
Like, I don't know, like
technology.
cancer's a societal
No,
problem. Like
talks
so
about
is like
emerging
erectile
technology.
dysfunction. Like what does it solve?
It's about emerging technologies.
Yeah, I think
It's about
it's
what?
in June.
Emerging technologies.
What part says emerging tech?
Let me find the card.
The truth is going to read impact defense like cancer and ED if like there's not a better line.
Alright,
So like,
We'll probably no link out of that, but you're welcome to do that.
I'm genuinely serious. Like, what do you think agencies solve post this 1 and C card? Like,
They
create-
create the efficacy of regulatory policymaking in general. We have said that is required for solutions to broader societal
what
problems.
solutions? Like
Well,
Biden
it is-
passes
it
the
is-
largest,
well, it
like
is
another
about-
large spending bill. Like,
Well, I mean, to be clear, that will be Congress. This is about administrative
So, like,
agencies
like-
and their ability to regulate in order to kind of promulgate effective
so
solutions.
the
to
emissions
societal
ruling that
problems.
the EPA or that the court made like a few months ago that limited the EPA's ability to cap emissions, like
Yeah,
like-
like they did, like limit Chevron and, kind of reinstantiate the major questions doctrine, but that's pretty irrelevant.
and the
for
counterclaim
this
overwhelms
because-
the court. How does the counterclaim overwhelm the court
Well-
just like fucking the agency?
To be clear, they didn't fuck the agency. They did not overturn Chevron. The major questions doctrine has been in existence
We've
for
also,
decades.
the net
It
benefit
exists.
the net benefit is entirely about fact finding, to be clear. It is not at all about
All right, 10 minutes. Trump 2024. I mean, it does. That's not shit.
That's not very nice.
We're sure turning the. Actually, shouldn't say it. Are you confident? I say Mhm. Where's that?
Oh, yeah. Oh, actually,
I forgot to put some case cards. Start card. Okay. 639. Okay, it's taking sweet time to upload. There we go. Should be sent. The order is the rights advantage, the injury advantage, T subsets, T nature, the K, fact stripping counterplan, consult counterplan, public trust counterplan, student loans DA, standing legitimacy DA. Say it one more time. Advantage 1 rights, advantage 2 injury, T subsets, T no nature, the K, the fact stripping counterplan, the consult counterplan, the public trust counterplan, loans DA, standing legitimacy DA. Anybody need it again?
I'm good.
Kentucky, both of y'all have the doc, and all 3 judges got it.
Yeah, sure, like 10 seconds.
Okay, engage, we're good. Okay. 2 drop impacts, 1 biodiversity, calling classic 60 disrupts in detailed disease-based life source possible, which is visual evidence. 2 is the Yang evidence, face schooling, patterns, solve collective human intelligence, distinction, centralize their intelligence, be able to respond to next generation threats, solving internal benefits, all the kind of because they're equally as ridiculous as ours. They know face force impact is overcome by the crib evidence. They go nuclear cause W, use unstable country escalate. They have no choice but to go to war because they need food access, biodiversity decline, only assumes birds. There are other species that will go extinct, which is the one you see evidence. The no solvency for women is solvency for the advocates. Courts will refuse environmental cases if they interfere with business interests in the future, which means that we solve for the second advantage. Now go there now. Rejecting injury in fact is the status quo. We agree. However, the plan allows nature's injuries to be weighed in the balancing test, which resolves their arguments. High sulfur close cause extinction. When is sun dipping causes agriculture, so blades every time reason comments, which is the no evidence to is acid rain. Conceded talks about water crisis, CCT tissue waste, cascades interaction, which is the crib evidence. Their argument about solvency is wrong. I'm going to make this argument very clear now. Plaintiffs can either use human injury like enjoyment of nature, or after the plan, they can use natural injury like the intrinsic value of it. The plan limits the former, which is more frivolous and worse relevant. When you see evidence is inserted in the doctor solvency argument, they say that leasing is high now, suits will come in the future which disrupt their leasing, or evidence assumes the litigation is increasing in the status quo. The argument of how independence is high now is not true. Small drops matter. The U.S. government is a swing producer with increased fossil fuel investment in 2023. The world's large gas producer is cheaper energy in the world. The cyclation is the case for household investors. Clients before Fisher OPEC rises 40%, while the U.S. also 58%, while they target sites out choose 5 pounds prices. Saudis already wants to reduce OPEC for high prices goods and post prices until way to capital investing in energy markets. Yet writing off fossil fuel makes the country more likely. Now, topicality subsets, we meet the plaintiff standing to all of nature, and the plaintiff is 2 rights, which means 1 or more. It's not the whole hill. It also means 1 or more is at least 1 required. The whole would be like a burger. But further, that 1 is plain meaning. It outweighs position. Only produces one which guides education. 2 is after picks are unbeatable, and AFF literature is sparse. It breaks the game for the NEG and causes burn after sides. Very 3 is functional limits. Nearest person creep. Any K flavor base con keep the negative game. 4 reasonability leaks someday. Self substance crowd out. The topicality no nature. Counterdiction. Legal rights do not require duties. Kramer 1. Opponents of rights here relation between rights and duties is false. On the other hand, some enjoy legal rights although they've not been under duties. All duty bearers are rights holders, but not all rights holders duty bearers. It applies to infants and common to people who no rights. Prefer one's position. Their interpretation defies the literature and action of the resolution, and their interpretation agrees it is purely theoretical. Corinthian 22 a mistake. To reject versus randomly natural entities, they don't give you brothers look at versus 2 is AFF ground. Their interpretation limit is 1/3 of AFF ground. Breaks the game for the NEG turns education with sale debates, and Kariki relies on Geller's Kariki 22, my position based on Geller's properties approach, who says that there's no AIFs, either Geller's 21 robots do not have rights, focus, and properties of intelligent artifacts. 3 is functional limits, nearest person, creep, any cave labor, biz, keep the negative game, crossline, reasonability, K, vote after the plan's invitation is now positive for the status quo, competitive alternative, the NEG should be accountable for uniqueness, concerns, and consequences of the alternative. 3, net benefits versus fairness, move the money, see, breaks the game for the NEG, causing burnout from research disparities and turns and benefits debate. The only valid solve is sewage education, weighing the plan, provides a thesis for class deliberation, lacks value, without discussions over application that trains debaters to be advocates. We should make fiat good. The AFF outweighs the war, removes the possibility for improvement and disproportionately impacts the environment from students to culture, which is the case phase. Permutation to both. If the alternative cannot overcome links to plan or to woman, the status quo will be resisted by government management bureaucracies, which the alternative does not fiat out of. Their justifications have no impact to the perm souls, and often sometimes get to calculate nature of richness 16. So we're into inclusion phase, which will be the edge of wedges, what about academic determined by exploitation. This represents market ignores them, ignores the ability of possible discrimination between the efficient increase in health level, without based exploitation for academic log force range safety score, hard the opposite already cutting the argument that we know. 2 little arguments for caution, why argue arguments around whether receiving nature people or its own say is philosophical increase the best way to why nature all the above motivation knowledge all is valid and use arguments of uncode because of how nature and we protect actions because of humans does not mean that the system cannot make it from matter moral sensibilities, no inhibitions. We cannot love reinforce actions if it not measure and at the same time measure carbon seeking the government protection. Should I read the next code? The alternative fails, verse 16. The non-defensive erosion which are taking out the utilitarian interest, a common right-wing accusation that they are dictated by motion rather than science or arguments of ecology, value, human capacity, or environmental law, and the suggested motion when the academic issues are against nature, take defense of hard time with the arguments which education must always be utilitarian, the right to vary the agenda as a preference. We know evolution for the rule book, we understand people are set down the world, not one for the divided, having passed the tipping point around the human agency, that which is what through construction, engineering, but let's talk to today's nature. That's proved to be fragile preservation of the world lies in the health of the communities, little wilderness, left of all spirits of nature is unchanging. Tells us about how to care for the planet. The fact stripping counterpoint permutation to both its shields by including the process of the counterpoint which their evidence describes as efficient. DAs are counterpoint good, not an opportunity cost of plan. Permutation to the counterpoint, they must be textually and functionally competitive, makes net benefits germane and incentivizes research and engagement. Education outweighs only permanent benefit of debate. Permutation to the plan and the counterpoint's process on something else. Limited intrinsic terms are good. We can either add text or function which solves germane to education. The text is in the document. The uncertainty of the counterpoint means it cannot solve advantage to the consulting an unaccountable body of juries and a confirmer courts can continue to investment is undermined by litigation because if they say no or change the plan, then companies will not trust it. That's when you see gold. Relevant portions are inserted for reference, and solvency burden should be high. The mere possibility of litigation of the counterpoint wipes out solvency. Roosevelt Twitter. Deepest destruction potential contact and hard to heavily the amounts of the environmental cases would suffer immediate harm to the construction of delays of objections on this project. Academic costs cannot be overloaded because the interest in oil and gas and basic resources contribute to independence and security. Many holding BLM permits will actively pursue oil and gas on BLM doesn't come to injection would for close possibility. Standing clarity is in our district right now. Latest in 13 like we were about the new universal guns making it possible to guys how much injuries and there's a little bit with it against rely courts demands. Injury despite injuries have nothing to do with the natural objects to have lost it to organization or denied must find individuals who allege recognize off frivolous feelings. There's no terminal and even a hint of an impact. So the 1 year gets to do answers. The counterpoint is one shot. There's no spillover. Chevron is getting eviscerated now. There's no agency deference to the world of the counterpoint. Matt's 18 demands Chevron deserved to 25 view of the SCP's crying now. Chevron was under siege. Robert's Civilian, Eludum Gorsuch sailed narrow the doctrine in King D. HG housing TX reject the argument deference. Marcus without a deference to being born show whether Chevron will remain. Shipping fails. Rex separation powers. F23. Stripping poses a great threat to the SOP, the equivalent nuclear war scholars focus on exclusive question constitution, out of basic close up front of a question, but stripping actually work contrary to whatever assumed no. Stripping will prove one is a backfire across all contexts, attempts to fail, combat persons will fail, stripping when access with the prominence of courses to stripping will empower others to share. Naturally, the preferences courts will refuse them, the courts itself will refuse case logic, justice courts will find its way around. That causes global war, I can vary in 5 critical. Instead of the world of radical power to character America, the outside world can see how policy making war the reach of hegemony has been driven by efforts to render power predictable and mature institution made it predictable. The regularized by policy reduce the process SOP creates a system that reduces about moves, messiness can confuse foreign observers, no spillover. Issue specific stripping fails, PC21, the ability of specific issue stripping prohibited bureaucracy limited since legislation would leave the possibility for the local constitution to produce the courts to reduce by stripping. Conditionality is a voting issue. It's a background of asset bias by incentivizing poor decision making and lowering the bar for research with time and tries to use it to easy digital solve the aptitudes with an A. Goes for consult counterpoint perm to both its shields by including the process of the counterpoint which was on the other counterpoint. Consultation is normal means Brian safety and inclusion. Let's take a watch within public interest opportunity to echo trauma consultation at federal level agencies and doing to trauma consults provide assessment for impacts permutation. Do the counterpoint must be text and function competitive, which was on the other counterpoint. There's another intrinsic term which is inserted in the document. Say no, Ripken 19. Determine the person is married and called political and cultural social contribute understanding of person citizens. What sorts of beings should qualified person in debates are stronger the beliefs person in controversial and tied to social context triggers difficult war questions. One shot consultation obviously cannot solve all of colonization. The impact is indistinguishable from the status quo. The PTZ counterpoint perm to both its shields because the counterpoint's language clarifies a plan perm to the counterpoint latest to 12 public trust could enable states to act as proxy for the environment. States to become the guardian of resources to represent their rights. It cannot solve one's biodiversity. Human interest will not outweigh pay to blue which causes settlement sugar. And 20 to hold rights with action they're going to regard injury the council accountable without saying if there's a polluting no focus damages like itself will get measured polluting damages while people frequently have to sue for harm to because like itself can be just legal. Right to show legal to deal to not enforce the rights of pollution stream by $10,000. People are only fed by 3,000 pollution issues to pay, continuing to defend and settle not including issues of natural issue also part of this settle including not include the terms also addressed. The stream 2 is leasing, focusing on human injury, continues status quo litigation that overburdens energy leasing operations, which is Nathan and push out evidence there. Counterpoint bans those leases, which is bad. Mendoza for U.S. application is high now. The counterpoint overturns it by a line collateral estoppel to be applied to the federal government. Tenny, if Mendoza holding estoppel cannot be used against federal litigation, if Mendoza adopted overall continues to be applied. That spikes nationwide injunctions, Larkin and Caprano 120 in cases where before Mendoza estoppel Minnesota percolation laws multiple judges consider the issue 2 had the better than one Mendoza forbids nationwide injunctions. Those destroy effective state national governments and enforce in 20 nation. Injunction over rules judgment issues 2 would have otherwise uncertain the judiciary creates an environment environment hostile democratic system. Nationwide injunction could run out the clock, be like a petition to the president's out of office, losses, political culture for state. Partisan wars, effective government assaults, extinction, Weiss and 22 technique, the world disaster, common nuclear war, pandemics, and these forces from this road. We have remove the guardrails, forcing people think about protection of immediate invasion, but we cannot on the road. We also need institution to vote top down, bottom up from state and local governments, directors, public pressure, ideas, and inspiration, public opinion, advocacy of individuals. We need limits and innovation that can lead to nuclear war, control their edge, and drive which involve great risk. The loans kind of DA. Uncertainties, not predictions for future election was on my team. Polls of narrowed uncertainties, we're getting wrong machines with discounts, the balance and sources, and disasters, for deadlines, and make it hard to wait in lines by balance, cause non-fiction pollsters cannot account for October surprises. Voters do not perceive policy in the courts. So many in 16 provinces regards potential knowledge child wouldn't give us in case we relate to. Their goals, married knowledge candidates support the policies not enough. Each of the complex of the public making it impossible for sensitivity to be or much less informed. Voters forget glass of 19 Trump era is overwhelming if it without research to remember beyond new cycle, no matter how stiff you remember that. I think that was Sunday. Standing legitimacy. Or do you? Oh yeah, there's no link. The plan doesn't change third-party injury standing. Reverse causal statistical evidence shows limiting injury factor event political activist rulemakings. Warshaw, Weiner, and Levin. Injury factor malleable to justify against its non-conflicting suffer no injury. Rather focus on gap proven environmental harm became a war, and those conceptual would win Scalia lost given flexibility ideology plays a role in decisions. One gave up to them just to preclude review of regulation covering 18 years. We found malleability for business case alleged split part of the law panels dismissed the same percentage after the law Republicans kept unchanged and kind of advantage control business cases over. Dismissed the plan refocus injury away from frivolous baby body human injury suits to natural suits where there is real injury latest in 13 standing. Would regraph focus on human harms and natural objects standing required by the organization was able to find one member said by harm instead of looking at real injury combined and intended finding natural resource rights wasted court large limited less than focus on serious. Because rather than busybody wildlife would also be recompensed instead of humans, limbs low and 7 research focus on party primarily injured, namely animal over aesthetic injury. This right is more likely to be recompensed of damage rather than humans who are injured. They've had a court legitimacy dead now free vault.
Say just politicization against the app.
No, I'm reading this. Free Volt 23. Overturn the road resulting in industry was dropping records. Dollars will be threatened since authorities unprecedented and disapproval rose to the highest point overturned by the precedent's court. Will tip Charlie favor to the right, likely to end affirmative action. Other problems with lack of respect for decisive dollars jetted precedent.
Sorry, what was the last part before you read on this one? Legitimacy?
Yeah, so it was free vote yeah, and it's kind of Dobbs, Jettison, precedent.
Okay. Okay. Injury advantage. The Newman card says that as more green energy comes online, U.S. energy independence will decline. What does the AFF do about those green energy projects?
Because it makes investment go back into fossil fuels.
Right. This is making a predictive claim. Your evidence is from 2016.
It creates a.
Why does clean coal overcome these surging investments?
First of all, we haven't made an argument about clean coal in terms of energy independence. But secondly, this evidence says that
wait,
U.S.
This is the same author as we read the one in C, except ours was 3 weeks later.
Quote, writing off. Okay, so the difference is that your evidence says that energy independence is high now. Our evidence says that could decline. It says, quote, writing off fossil fuels too early makes such a crunch more likely, which creates a brink claim for the app. So yes, we agree it's high now, but the author also says that it could decline if investment declines, which we have made an internal link argument that says that will happen.
That's fine. The fact stripping counterplan. This litigation deficit, why does the counterplan cause more litigation in the plan?
Fact stripping?
Yes.
Because you give the authority over the plan to an unaccountable body of fact finders, which the business interests would be like,
I'm not seeing the connection. Why does that mean more litigation?
Well, it means that litigation wouldn't decrease from status quo levels because nobody trusts the counterpart.
As opposed
to, do you really think that if we were to give the authority
more than a specially appointed fact finder?
First of all, the specially appointed fact finders is a differential process than the status quo, which your competition arguments, and all your reasons why process counterplans are good prove that the certainty of the app through the normal process of court adjudication is necessary to create certainty for business interests.
Wait, what part do you think says that the normal process of adjudication is the thing that makes business certain?
That is the entire defense of the 1EC. I can go through and read all.
You're advocating for alterations in standing requirements. How are you saying that existing
that business interests want when we do those standing requirements in this unaccountable body of fact finders that is not in normal court adjudication?
What makes a judicially appointed fact finder that our evidence says is just a trial judge any different from just like an appellate judge also having to do fact finding in the world of the plan?
Because that ignores the process of the counterplan. If those things existed now, people would probably be like, maybe that makes sense.
So if we read cards and say that they do, then
no, because the process of the counterplan creating this new thing that is specifically focused on just the plan's jurisdiction is no basis and has never been done in constitutional law. And people be like, what the hell is happening? Like, does this standing law even apply to other areas?
We have read evidence describing the implementation of fact finding, and you are asserting they've never existed before. Like why would people?
They've never been endowed with the authority. Like this is why like debate meta garbage is so silly, because it's like, okay, we are going to give this one body authority over this one thing.
I want you to
so
read
that
our
we
cards.
can't
Like,
read DAs, we can't go for competition. Like obviously that would
Not really a question,
in the
but,
mind
like,
of industry
cards very
executives,
specific.
that would be ridiculous. It's never been done before.
10 minutes.
was Conda the only reason to reject the team?
Yeah.
$7.16. I need to run to the bathroom real quick.
How much prep do you have remaining?
760.
Sorry. Moving over here for a moment. Fact stripping counterpoint. PTD counterpoint. Consult counterpoint. Rights advantage. Injury advantage. Need any one or more parts of that repeated? Anybody?
So
Just do the all.
plans and then the advantages and work.
Yes.
What are the two?
PTD and then consult.
Gotcha. Okay.
We're good.
What was the order of the advantages?
Rights and then injury.
Right.
Put it standing in the top. That's because I forgot those.
Might make the documents.
We're good? Sweet.
There is no coherent solvency deficit to the counterpoint that solves the entirety of the case by denying standing in cases appealed from administrative tribunals to appellate courts. Finding those courts must first demand evidence of standing and seek independent review prior to evaluating the merits of the case. It results in a similar right, but avoids circumvention of fact-finding by administrative agencies who take advantage of the lack of appellate court expertise in standing disputes to structurally bias courts away from enforcing the plan. They have no defense of why standing in all instances necessary, so the threshold for Kansas winning a solvency deficit is proof that agencies must win every suit and can't without distorting the factual record. First, a procedural thing, because there was a grammatical issue in the 1MC text. I need to amend it. The United States should grant nature right to be named in and have injury weighed in lawsuits originating in lower courts from denying its standing on appeal and other grounds of doing so requires the appointment of a successful fact-finding magistrate prior to the resolution of factual standing disputes and the presentation of evidence of standing at the earliest possible opportunity. That's good at the NDT to protect us from badly written plain text, and because copy and pasting is really hard, we don't get new 2 and C counterplans, but we do get to amend them because it's necessary for negative ground and adequate engagement with the app. Permutation do both fails. One, mandate the counterplan bans the plan that stops sweeping legal rights from being granted prior to the implementation of the counterplan, so the permutation is illogical. 2, standing, it immediately grants access to legal rights, overriding the counterplan's conditional standing mandate. It ensures that appellate courts can act as fact finders in cases from administrative courts, since disputes no longer require special magistrates in order to establish standing. That's while the move 3 sequencing, only letting lower courts go first, establishes the appropriate sequence to constrain appellate failures time, and 12 and a court decides an issue not decided by inferior deciding no, not crediting error, not deciding with the benefit of thinking Lord, this goes to the heart of the whole court sequence theory, enforcing courts of order the order deciding significant impact vertical rules for exonerated appealability of expressive decisions. Per the counterplan is separate to voting issue for ground 1 function. It's less than the plan. It denies standing to nature, something the plan text explicitly precludes, and no rating of the plan text appoints a special magistrates that's distinct from your right or duty. 2, text vests fixing irrevocable white side 73 vests to give an immediate fixed right of present future joint vesting includes the right to present fixed right as you fix irrevocable means without exception. Walker 18 article 2 vesting clause means that power shall without exception belong to the present action alone, and true article 3 means that neutral power must without exception belong to judges. It's not a legal right since those require standing. Lewis 62 any litigant who challenge actions and standing his word of art for an interest with her worthy legal protection was complained of the legal right to present indicates a controversy for another policy of rights because they know legal right unless right if it is legal no property rights and a contract against source of patient found out essentially which first purpose of the constitution could have been a source of legal right constitutional right and a source of standing for the person determining whether his legal right function should be defined via text is the only standard that works for responsible plan writing to give great big answers to enable that kind of plan competition. It's not too easy shiftiness and circumventing neg offense if they want to promote neg on T because forcing conditional rights applications is key to DA links. Not going to read the other topical requirements. Other issues permits incoherent who require both the vesting of a new right, making it functionally intrinsic, since the counterplan's application is limited to the plan and at a new entity, neither the counterplan nor the plan text. That precedent denies any counterplan of benefits. They get a limited amendment. We write a DA to the plan that the counterplan is also uniqueness for, so it is a non-starter. It is also a relevant opportunity cost. The plan foregoes the opportunity to alter standing, and excluding this counterplan destroys search for best policy options vague, and they didn't specify the issue. Voting issue because here DAs resolves the arguments about insufficiency. Also means to get struck down. CRS 7 under Article 3 jurisdictions is limited to actual ongoing controversy from this justiciability case must exist throughout judicial proceedings. The counterplan certainly does solve the trust solvency deficit. Cross-X proves that it is not comparative because the plan also requires unaccountable Article 1 judges in order to determine fact-finding, and then appellate judges who are terrible at their jobs, which is the thesis of our solvency argument. It is very well substantiated by 1 and C Wilder Oath. Establishing fact-finding procedures stops arbitrary decisions from doing the case. Ward 11, the absence of rules courts. They come as they go, create an accuracy litigant court based on research and no reason to vary. And the absence of rules variance is inevitable. Even courts can find relevant facts to do so without process that is factor. Accurate does not determine factor gravity shockers and have also the procedures they for. That's direct at a direct level and appellate facts. More complicated resolution of the impact word. We found a case when they agree or resolve paradox results in facts that most of the defense are less likely to receive this. Can affect not only quality of decision but also overall legitimacy, confusion, derail, solvency, while the Davies standing out of frustrated parties not ruling in the rest of competency. Thinking ideological driven manipulation, standing that facts fact limitation of against the grammar courts. Use standing interpreting still strong substance as doctrine. There's a risk of truly effective force. Under willing to decide standing without the right, without the result may be
fear of some reality, courts standing improperly, some parties who believe that courts standing improperly from seeking questions about whether this injunction has the sort of increase possible measure when he restraint is challenging when standing is used to usually tendency. I don't know for the result of standing decision making exacerbating sorts of reasonability or negative since there's subject to their Arvada fallacy. Article 9, when question whether the courts have any role to play in deciding facts must not have operated that Arvada fallacy expertise on which is not reduced cognitive bias experts unless able to think differently, recognize the limits of the method agency may be overcome and not able to temporarily idealistic so it can be allocated whether it takes into account strengths and weaknesses. It does solve servancy because the point of fact finders are trial judges that people already know. The AFF is not normal because per cross-sex either, but it is key to clarity. Simon 12, we additionally defended a division of functional trial on functional grounds historically trial courts advantage fact finding for consistency even when F is available. Two appellate judges enormous appellate courts address only after tribunals of theory case law and open time to integrate clarity certainty when trial judges make initial determinations that appellate courts review. Specialized fact finders are great and well known. Board 11 court should consider procedure most appropriate assumption factual findings in appellate opinions or section testing against courts turn to experts and specialized factual judges do not engage in ad hoc cherry picking. All litigants know info they can submit, even if it is somewhat unclear. It is miles and miles better than the status quo, which is how you should measure it because that is how business actors will perceive it. And it means the counterpoint is overwhelmingly sufficient to solve the case. There is certainly a net benefit. The counterpoint forces effective agency action. Courts can establish procedural safeguards against agency expertise justifying an action. Appellate fact finding structurally favors agencies, incentivizing lack of justification for decisions and causing uncertainty that's gauche. Otherwise, policy irregularity becomes a structural as internal agency failure gets cycles of entrenchment that do reflect response to existential threats. That's Chen. There is an impact that outweighs on magnitude because regulatory dysfunction hammers every response to societal threats, results in structural biases that dig us into deeper holes. That's Chen. Forcing effective response contains them. Collier 21 disease. We financial support actions suffered 5 points of vulnerability uses so much life defense and catastrophic events and they make world independence and disruptions. Spread adamant devices they give vulnerability organizing prevent events from disaster disease black server on specialized expertise assessment. Other mental system required to stay in life from nuclear attack agencies took on fast function related to welfare management mobilization for middle powers referred to administrative state. It turns the case because ensures the AFF enforcement remains ineffective as long as regulation cannot bind people to respect or enforce its rights and obligations. That is Chen. The link is not about sort of judicial stripping, which is what their argument is about, but the plan requires appellate fact finding where the government can be sued for issuing regulations for violating a right of nature or to enforce a duty that occurs in an administrative court. When that court inevitably decides in favor of the government, nature will have to appeal, which originates in an appellate court and forces the appellate court to act as a fact finder. That's while removed. That's proven by 1AC evidence describing suits brought under the CAA and CWA, which pertain to government actions and first start at the agency level. Per all of our evidence, it results in undue deference, done 22 deference, agency fact finding, inclusive constitutional principles. Administrative state openly floods every important precept of the constitutional order, Supreme Court question deference, by crediting the constitutional fact doctrine. All the cards that you read at the bottom here are about sort of Congress stripping the power of the judiciary or sort of administrative powers or separation of powers broadly. That is not the counterpoint because the counterpoint happens exclusively within the courts and stays confined to their specific mandate per all of our evidence, which means that there is no link to any of their offense. Condo is good. We get what we did. One night flex to test the app from multiple angles, which increased education is most for the world. And outweighs skew at the NDT, where every app is new. 2, logic, they arbitrarily insulate the app from testing, which destroys the purpose of debate. 3, skew is inevitable because of TDA's case argument. Something unique about advocacy's 4, reasonability theory is cowardice, and the theory argument confirms that post hoc correctives cause crowd out. 5, dispo fails, arbitrary condo disguise, and forces process counterpoints like spam, which are bad for education. The PTD counterplan, not going for any of the planks except for the one that is a uniqueness counterplan for the internal net benefits, the fact stripping counterplan, which is plank number 2. You can see the perm for the plank 1 and 3. It means that they cannot just go for a permutation because we now have a uniqueness counterplan that the plan is a DA2 and both is a DA2. It means that because they have not answered the link to the argument on the other counterplan, it's screwed. The Weiss evidence that they reviewed for the add-on is the impact to the other counterplanks. It's about agency effectiveness in combating emerging technology, which the app does not solve, and they've considered agencies are a part of question 2 because they are the ones that control our response to those societal threats, which their evidence says is good. Consult counterplan, perm has a competition theory, project there on the team. Rights. Advantage. Disadvantage is patently ridiculous. 1, logic. 0 1AC cards say litigants will win suits given judicial balancing. 1AC make is predictive. It says courts rule against the plaintiffs to protect business interests by weighing environmental injuries. Right? Their only answer to this is it's solvency for advantage 2. Great. It's not solvency for advantage 1 because they read an impact about needing to protect biodiversity through judicial decision making, and they did not explain why that is a result of the plan. 2, difficulty. Only strict standing stops lobbyists from derailing both advantages. Gifford 11, plaintiffs face child regarding extended litigants not probably situated adjudication without concrete immediate harm to a course of concrete personal injury concerns the adversary caused by certain parties have an actual safety question resolving concrete factual conduct require merits cases that not require resolution following the court's trade and resources standing reducing litigation restricting and sequencing influence document presidential facts of injuries like cases with facts that most likely deal with system without injury would be easier enabling standing judicial election of walking court upgraded state script toward awards and court standing may be implicated standing further than S&P legislation are not free to decide issues presented into consensus. 1, free defense, no birds, no bio impact. We did free defense. There's no mechanism for cascades. Evidence to support tipping points. Relevant studies are too small. Data shows local diversity is growing. Humanity survives loss 50% and substitution solves relevant to clients. It's Kariva. There's no fish wars are empirically disproven. It may exacerbate conflict stressors, but fish themselves are never key, and starving people can't fight wars. That's Vespi. Fish stocks are resilient because it is empirically proven. Thousands of years of human history did not require the act. Standing advantage.
They do not access this advantage. 1. Balancing. Crossix established that Pushshot advocates for new objective standards for injuries weighing nature's interests does not force the courts to change how they understand injury. In fact, no such thing as a human injury under current standards. Our Robert evidence clearly outlines the test as just requiring causation, foreseeability, and redressability, none of which require a human to be injured, just that they are precluded by the sort of nature of those standards. Courts will never abandon that standard. Article 21 for those who see the party has to be understanding. I can make very challenging for animal government advocacy and animal government court humans must have some kind of injury to bring the case 5. Just to reiterate, Congress not against time when a person is injured every time the Supreme Court takes an error review standing makes it a bit harder for animal advocates. 2. Uncertainty. It's inevitable because of some legal shifts only created by the plan that was largely done in the counterplan. 3. Defense. Acid rain scenario has no uniqueness. Modernized procedures are being rolled out. Nicholson references in sulfur, but the thing it says is existential is SRM, and low sulfur coal meets the CAA, so it wins lawsuits. Second to prep, sorry. Wait, can you just extend the human card on the issue? Yep. Good. 7:10.
Okay, we're gonna take prep for process. I gotta go. 5. Or never mind. 5:46. Okay, are you good?
Yeah.
All right, I missed the counter interpretation for competition. What was it?
It was that counterplan function should be defined via text. It means if we define the words of the plan to be different from the mandate of the counterplan, that is the way the judges should determine if the counterplan of the plan is mutually exclusive.
Okay, great. The argument about how like the counterplan isn't stripping, to be clear, the courts would be the ones who oppose who appoint the magistrate of the counterplan. Is that correct?
Yeah, the Wildermuth evidence says that it would likely be a trial court judge.
Okay, who does the action of the plan then?
Who does the action? Same actor as the plan.
Same actor as the plan?
Yeah.
Okay, sure. Then some of your arguments about how like specialized magistrates are better for certainty, why?
Well, okay, because we've read like 7 cards, both in the 1NC and the 2NC.
I don't care about cards. I want to know why.
Okay, well, I'm going to explain why. Okay. So our evidence indicates that when appellate courts are forced to find facts, they lack very basic procedures of things like discovery, cross-examination, and normal submitting for the process of motions, which generally results in their decisions structurally favoring agencies and administrative agencies when that procedure does not happen. When a decision is repealed or appealed from an administrative tribunal to the appellate court, there is no necessary fact-finding procedure that would normally be done by a lower court that happens. And so the appellate court has to rely purely on the factual record that is presented by the agency.
Okay, under that explanation, in like the courts of the counterplan, is there greater deference towards the administrative agencies?
No.
So then is it greater weight then towards the plaintiffs?
No, it's objective fact-finding rather than just the agency's record.
Okay,
it is normal fact-finding procedures. How biased that would depend on whose case is better in the context of a lawsuit.
So, but you've said like the appellate courts that presumably the plan would be enforced by are biased towards agencies.
They're biased toward agencies, not by any fault of their own, but by the nature of fact-finding when cases are appealed.
Okay, that makes sense. Is the win rates like 50-50 in the world of the counterplan?
I don't know. Like that would depend on the merits of the lawsuit. That's something I can't predict.
Okay, sure. Then what? Okay, so if to clarify, the counterplan's less or more deference?
Then what?
Like you've said that it stops like undue deference. Is that correct?
Yeah, the counterplan is like less deference in the context of fact finding, but with regards to like Chevron, for example, the counterplan does not implicate that at all.
Then how do you solve a lot of your internal links about broad regulatory changes if you don't change like the legal structure?
So the Chen evidence is about regulatory dysfunction that happens as a result of agencies sort of being stuck in an echo chamber. So what happens is because agencies are able to win lawsuits on the basis of their own justified decision-making rather than having to justify it in the context of like a fact finder, for example, the agency then has no need to be reflexive about the decisions that it's making. And so it's likely to have a lot of unforced errors as a result of the inability to have to justify that decision to somebody outside of their narrow realm of expertise.
Sure. Did you write down?
We use 52 seconds.
Okay.
Yeah, 546.
That was what we had before. So you said 52 seconds. So
Sorry.
4.
52.
Yeah, 52. Okay. Good.
Okay. 4:30.
For how much?
4:30.
Okay, 1R is it'll be the injury advantage, the judicial independence disad, the loans disad, the critique. Is let me know whenever you get it.
Wait, can you say that again? Sorry.
Yeah. The injury advantage, judicial independence disad, loans disad, the critique. Is everyone good? Energy independence is high. Newer evidence and the new evidence from the same author says the U.S. is less vulnerable now. It's predictive. It says that even if writing off fossil fuels is bad, we are dependent enough for it to have an impact. It says that it is predictive. It says that in 2019, the first time since the 50s, we've been on net export. The net exporter. It says it will continue to continue innovations. The independence is that continue legitimacy is dead. Not going for it. No offense. The loans is that continue. No voters care about it. No offense. Not going for it. Critique environmental governance is an inevitable and potentially worthwhile solution to environmental catastrophe. However, these systems of governance can also be used to exacerbate the very same catastrophe and to drive the domination of bodies through depoliticization and colonization, which is conceded on structural impact. Our argument is the affirmative vesting of rights in nature is just the most recent example of a violent mode of environmentality, which will lock in systems of oppression and guarantee the continued destruction of the earth. You should vote negative for a liberatory model of environmentality, not plagued by the ills of mainstream environmentalism, and then to produce imaginative solutions to our ecological crisis framework. The 20 season object of research, the ag burden is to prove that they can win the app. The only way reasons why their investment in managerialism is good, not with the app and vacuum is good. That's best. First, unsolved formations are viewed within policymaking, and the mood of President Willie pretty sure they don't define methodology. They don't define methodologies can be used to address non-cultural incommensability on the incommensability to negotiate and provide an agreed upon rules of negotiation. When negotiating on cultural commitments and acting source ethics support the procedure crisis with an acknowledgement outlining fancy authority speaking approaches and then from a cultural policy transformation greater possibility for those in promoting empowerment might not be possible than existing structures that are already kind of ontology. Also, boundaries for running when it's real and when can be seen. Second, supporting managerialism brainwashes the next generation of monopolized violence, made debate train students and anybody to persuade points. It's try or die. There's conceded uniqueness claim. The managerialism causes extinctions. You should punish students who support it. It's especially true in the interpretation eliminates the ability of the negative question managerialism, creating a feedback loop of unreflexive debaters. Someone to question the ideologies they internalize the process of disagreement. They do the Trojan horse of uniqueness and material solvency. Group their offense versus predictable and grounded in literature. They should have a defense of their ideological underpinnings because they're deployed as justifications for planet's desirability. Second is reciprocal theory, unobservable and force of the act by lack of will is utopian. That's reflect reality. Next, you get an equitable right to test desirability, not feasibility. Third, even if they consider links to the plan, so it doesn't get them anything. Fourth, the app creates uniqueness because it increases level of managerialism by increasing coal leasing at the benefit of oil and gas and the detriment of environmental value by describing nature's value, the end-centric and the lens of economic balancing and human interest. On the links here, all this as the to the firm. Actually, the framework fiat good is an offense. We're not saying that fiat is bad. We're just saying that we should be able to put them to question the reasons for why the plan and why they say the plan is good. The links each link will demonstrate how the affirmative is a failed model of environmentality. The practice link in cultural governance is a broad history of violently extracting the mining from the the earth, which produced our current state of environmental catastrophe. Rights for nature promises to act as a corrective. The ideological underpinnings of mainstream environmentalism in theory, but in practice, vesting rights in nature has been used by governments to further extraction, mining practice through utilitarian cost benefits calculation, making it necessary to use and exploit nature in order to save and improve her. Additionally, rights for nature set ideological limits on when nature can be protected and by whom. This turns the case because the lawsuits that are necessary to challenge exploitation of the environment via standing and to solve the acts advantages are conveniently curtailed in favor of liberal market interests, which rights environmental protection. That's Valderas and Ballins. 1AC Babcock says that a test which balanced economic hardship against interest would exclude degradation from the balance. For example, a stream. 1AC Woodward says standing to sue in their own right for human advocates for wildlife would hardly alter the status quo. The plan is nothing more than tinkering around the edges of environmental management, Trojan horse, the expansion of big coal, trading off with newly developed renewables. That was tracing cross-sects in the minute journalism, like environmental politics today has failed to address the underlying ideologies that have exacerbated climate change beyond the tipping points that have doomed whole society. The affirmative managerialist problem-solving approach to environmental catastrophe fails to further climate change and in fact traps rights in nature as a legal strategy within the balance of nature environmentalism, which reproduces and normalized ideologies of like capitalism, the guarantee environmental destruction and political domination of earth and urban inhabitants through colonization. That's Hammond, all blowing for drill out. They just answered maybe a terminal impact to it, but even if it is theoretically desirable to use human interests to justify managerialism, which is all their cards, and all links proven in practice, its deployment will be mobilized to ensure the continued dominance of energy because as proven by the second advantage being about coal, and it is all the JD candidates and the Kansas has vigorously cited are all in the pockets of big oil. They've been advocating for expanded standing requirements in order to expand kind of create the new natural gas as an illusion of being able to solve environmental concerns while only entrenching it on destruction further. The upper proverb, the odds mutually exclusive of the affirmative, is impossible to analyze the affirmative and introduce policy. The affirmative severance, they would have to sever vesting rights in nature, which the thesis of the affirmative, because all the links are about it. That makes the app conditional, which is uniquely bad because of side bias. If in a preference it's a voter for competitive equity, every link exists at the firm. On new link, white faces discourse rights in nature, confusing liberal rights from the problem, creating those same rights which obscure systems of power and perpetuate racial and gender hierarchies within legal systems whole. And with 22 the former source of neighbor rights in these power days of the legal populations are when and saying and also power speaking for our people toward corporations which has additional environmental impacts and criminal rights that are being now confident about the rights that history has the power of naturalized the rights that and reinforce racial and narrow racial gender hierarchy within the legal system and ensure power of leads and states and these states and rights in nature can perpetuate these hierarchies, all those essential rights and equality. The theory of lobby through what anybody formed and structured by different gamifications and different from the internet and all specific links, obviously, and the term double bind. Those argument we propose a multidimensional analysis of the affirmative as framework. It tells you comparative study of the economic structures, discursive formations, and beliefs that inform both material and discursive dimensions of the project. The goal of our analysis is to reduce a liberatory form of environmentality that's equipped to reduce a viable and imaginative alternatives to a crisis and challenge ideology of control. The part they run the all. This is about conservatives saying that environmental activists care too much about emotion. It does not get to co-option, but if it did, the exact same accusation will be leveled against the plan, so it's not a comparative offense. That is this and the all is mutually exclusive with the affirmative. It is impossible to analyze the affirmative and to produce policy or links will demonstrate. Well, no, that has demonstrated by the affirmative method of environmentality is not liberatory and not political discourse and ministerial policy failure. You should vote negative over the potential of the odds framework to create a foundation for producing better models of environmental governance and scalable to all levels and sizes of governance, which means that liberatory models of environmentality can become possible on a global scale and challenge domination of it and destruction of Earth. And so there's only a risk the odds solve all of their impacts much better than they do, but it's mutually exclusive and that is mutually exclusive with the plan.
Fourth.
Frankly, all the way that we have to work back out, then I can't look at the humor back and we're doing all things. No, I will stop it when you look at the movie, you know, the way in which how it is,
And 27. It should be. It's going to be the injury advantage, the rights advantage, the back stripping counterplay, the PTD counterplay, and then the cap. Advantage 2, advantage 1, back stripping, PTD.
Start. Where should it be? Okay, 128.
28.
Yeah.
Very good.
I need a second.
You do the order just one more time.
Advantage 2, advantage 1, back stripping, PTD or like unique disorder, and then the cap.
Good.
The plan does create certainty via the balancing test. The plaintiffs still have to prove the three standards that David's list, but it just means that nature's interest can be weighed in the context of redress and addressability, and it precludes political interest because nature would matter, and the political interest would no longer be involved, which is the Carter evidence. This is just a description of the status quo. The acid not going to go for a sulfate post plan. There would be more high sulfur because it causes the effect of SRM. It is not SRM X essential, but the high sulfur creates the same thing. It causes black carbon and decrease the amount of ecosystem. And lastly, industry uniqueness. It will decrease human uniqueness, so that leasing will be uncertain. So, to decrease investment in the future, the fact that we do not have complete energy independence now and still rely on Saudi and Russia means that further investment in predictability is needed. This our uniqueness argument that says that there's still some level that could be bad. The rights advantage concede impact defense makes the K impact inevitable. Or gets rid of most of the K impact and choose that business interests will always be weighed way more, which makes most of the other part of the K inevitable because managerialism is the status quo. The fact stripping counterpoint 1 extend to both resolves any residual offense. I would do the counterpoint here. Text and can function is good. It rewards the most substantive math process while filtering out the worst axis of their model. Education outweighs fairness also year to year, but it's the only permanent benefit. The debate prevent arbitrariness, which turns fairness, will defend certainty and immediacy for dissents, not counterplay solves. Their offense and arbitrariness matters none in their theory debates because it is not in the resolution. The text of the resolution supports exemption from what should be noted, thus accepting exceptional errors under the possibility of addition. This debate leaves some disruption. Competent text alone, after it outweighs its necessary prerequisite NEG formulations and sets the terms in the literature, which encourages better research. Text alone is bad. One encourages the worst. NEG forces regressive semantic distinctions like replacing should with ought, rephrasing the plan or reading in a different language. That AFF, stealing everything except the plan's phraseology makes it impossible. The leverage offense. B, unpredictable, creates too many indefensible vectors for attacking the plan. C, anti-educational, obvious, the most germane. F, appraisals. This link turns NEG by creating an incentive structure for plan vagueness. 2, it's a logical ban. The plan because non-kinetic proves textual alone is inaccurate. 3, function matters. It's the most intuitive because it that includes the complete plan function doesn't disprove the F. There's no offense. Textual plus functional preserves NEG ground, just raises the threshold of what constitutes a legitimate test of the plan. 2, reading that benefit as a dissent solves it textually distinct. The textual distinction is truly significant. It would disprove that without competing definitions. Best is their best is wrong. James and 10. Best given the fixed immediate future remedies and confirmation of immediate fix. The right that this occurred only after complete obligation of the plan. This contention does the future right is best. All apps must grant rights, but their benefits don't have to be certain immediate only in 76 the definition of best and future right. In this percentage is the here is alienation of the possession of imprisonment. This sometimes the future never materialized. Vested would have exemptions. 1 and 3 vested right immutable to say. The first such rights not render them immutable. The necessary legal rights for car enforcement, not standing civil interest in court of legal right. This right to legal enforce, but this thing actually that can be a 2-year card when they blow it up. Resolve is the backwards path in 18. Resolve causes upon the state oppositely and go for the resolution. Should is optional. FA 30 should be optional. Choose an option. Should they recommend only the option where face standing substantial is not in the resolution or the plain text preferred for half ground, which was impacted not above. Now. The stage stripping stuff, the plan and the counterplan are both Congress proofs that it will lead to jurisdiction stripping because they
No, just read the card that you skipped and then go to the K.
But if the distinction of the counterplan, then it cannot solve the app because parties must have standing to injury in court binding. The 21 article there, the jurisdiction of party have to standing that requires injury in fact, which is a particular calculus action of a particular injury. Must find the plaintiff in a personal way. Not on behalf of the third party, the counterplan solved better is wrong. The last card they read says that the agencies and courts must act cohesively, which justifies do both. Then 2 is that this is counterplan good, not plan bad, because our evidence says that giving standing to nature is sufficient releases to be predictable. The other part about standing bad is about the status quo does not assume a world of plan where it creates more certainty. Turns enforcement fiat solves this, and we're not going for the environment. So it doesn't matter. The internal the internal net benefit is agencies are getting very so-called in 22. The same purpose of research to try harder APA given the consider making understanding this one absent of rule component with station sessions on interest neighbors to every getting the authority rely on MP. The plus the question the PTD counterplan 1 conceded that states solve existential threats. It was not just about agencies, which means that agencies are not key to the internal net benefit Perm do the counterplan on fact finding without the ban the plan playing. It's legit because they amended the counterplan. Conditionality of voting issue causes.
No, just go to the K.
I don't need that much time.
No, go to the K.
I guess the K. Framework. Weigh the hypothetical implementation of the advocacy of fairness in the predictable model. One is holistic. The middle one is laws. This is competition and word picks often core offensive research. You link, you lose shifts. The next is the after resolution goes straight to my new NEG area. 2 is fairness outweighs. It causes burnout from every criticism in each theory, which makes that an auto win debate is a game proven by wins, loses, strategies, and norms. In this game of interest, so every shift matters. 3 terms are offense. We can't engage in their scholarship. They pick any corner of the library to criticize the one you see way. The app is the bare minimum to get back in the game. 4 solves their offense. We don't preclude case, just prove our rhetoric outweighs and the app's policies. Then justify a competitive solvents alternative. Weighing the plan turns their offense, even if you think their education is good and ethical. Absent stability and their discussion becomes monologues with no improvements, sacrificing subsection of the library and prioritizing the plan issues and effective middle ground for everyone. In education offense, we meet their interpretation. The consequences of not doing the plan turns the object of research and ontology thing. The ontological formations, our framework does not preclude it, just that the effects of our ontological security leads to some bad policy outcome, which is sufficient. And we are not plan focused or policy sole focus alone, just that our often should be weighed. The next argument about how it's not infinitely aggressive is because you can read highly random parts of the one you see and say that you're broadly managerialism, and it's a slippery slope from justification to the app broadly. Any sort of link argument that they can make because they've linked us to generic our own, which is not us. The reciprocal argument is wrong because we're still tied through the resolution and functional limits. The competition debate proves that it is reciprocal. Utopian, the app is should not would, and it's not utopian because you get to the other world, and the world is not fucking managerial. Now the subject formation stuff doesn't solve their offense. One is content retention. Losses are internalized as techno fears that we double down onto subjectivity. We suicides go for opposite arguments. Schools, shops, parents. They're fucking Kentucky. One round is a drop in the bucket. Now the link debate. We have impacted the managerialism in some context. philosophies are good because philosophy cannot change anything. Alt-right fills in absent inevitably because they use the same justification to make sure that fracking, oil, and other bad environmental harms continue on a much larger scale, causes things like genetic engineering, nuclear war, and bad environmental outcomes, which turns the fact of the criticism, which is that the triad for some level of managerialism, which increases the amount of environmental policies that can be good.
Intent.
I didn't answer much.
Yeah. The layout.
Kids get $100 so they can, proves a bit of community connection.
Yeah.
We got programs. So it's good.
Yeah, I think that's the way to.
Or you also go. Everything else, it seems like that's just a ton of general management of cats.
We don't have, yeah. I think 150, and they are very self-sufficient, but if you're a positive, don't get anything, and but
It's pretty sweet how we're patient. So there's 30 patients. You don't do anything over that.
it's also, they ask for stuff, because they get so expressed, and they're like, I don't know.
I assume you've been fully oriented around the sushi scene. Yeah.
Maybe in luxury.
It seems like he knows really everything about it.
Yeah, he's very plugged in.
They want your plans, you're just kind of hanging around. Now doing that for a while, or
I think I'm gonna stop in college this year. And then I'll just go back and go to year back to school.
law school, or else the work there.
Maybe. I want to take some time off. Yeah, I'm like, oh, look at it, 4 years. I'll be back. Well, I don't know. But I think I'm gonna max college just to hear how it's going. This year is just unfortunate, but it's really everyone.
Makes sense.
Actually, I don't think that what I'm doing. Counterplan K. All right. We're good?
Give me 1 second. Sure.
Drop counterplan solvency frames the permutation because we're winning that the counterplan and the perm are categorically distinct, and any attempt by the 2AR to convince you otherwise is both unclear and not substantiated by any 1AR evidence. The counterplan certainly solves the case, but it does not grant standing, which is the only thing mandated by the plan text, because it does not grant standing to nature in appellate courts and denies standing when that possibility even exists, which means that any reading of the plan text, even if slightly conditional, even if it offers the possibility to have exceptions to the right being granted, does not allow for the subsequent and complete denial of that right in the name of fiat and the mandate of the counterplan. It means that the permutation is absolutely nonsensical. Permutation do both obviously consider benefit. They conceded that only the counterplan enables agency flexibility necessary to confront emerging technology, disease, and financial collapse, which are guaranteed to be existential and outweigh its any impact. Any solvency deficit because the 2AR or the 1AR did not have one. The top level frame for how you should view the rest of the permutation debating is that they have read one card that says that they can have exceptions. The counterplan is not an exception to a rule. The counterplan is an entirely different rule than the plan because the plan requires the legal right to stand in court. That legal right, only we have read evidence in the form of our Wildermuth cards and every solvency card that we've read on the counterplan says the legal right to stand is in self unequivocal. It is not something that could be simply denied in certain circumstances because the mandate of the plan necessarily requires that things can stand in Article 1 courts, and that is the way that we have generated competition for this argument. The most important definition in this debate is the phrase legal rights. We do not grant them in the world of the counterplan because we've read specific evidence that says that the phrase legal rights precludes the denial of standing.
We have read evidence that says that the distinction matters because even if they are right that legal rights are inherently enforceable, which is what the only 1AR card that tries to define them is, this is our argument about enforceability because the counterplan makes it such that the right to standing is not enforceable in a set of circumstances. They have not read evidence that says that legal rights can have sort of exceptions. They've read cards about vested rights, which is not a word in the resolution, so you should reject it because it's neither in the plain counterplan text nor the plain text, and the counterplan does not use the word vest. And so even if they are right that vest could mean something similar to the counterplan, the fact that they've included legal right in their plain text means that that right itself cannot be denied, and the 1AR has absolutely no skin in the game in this context because the counterplan inherently stops their enforceability. It can give the right to stand, but it does not say that that right applies in all circumstances, which is our Lewis evidence, which is phenomenal, and you should read it after the debate. It indicates that legal rights are a limited set of rights and that they require standing in order to be enforced. The counterplan directly and it very explicitly fiats that the right cannot be enforced, which is why the counterplan text also does not use the word legal right in order to achieve its outcome, because it denies that right, something that is expressly precluded by the plain text. No part of the 1AR deficit debating or 1AR defends exactly how any of just like the random definitions from the KU back files they read actually answer any argument that we have made. And so the 2AR should not get to do that either, because obviously the application to this is incredibly unclear given the specificity of the counterplan, and that would be new and skews the 2 and R. The counterplan certainly functionally competes because it is different than the plan. They have dropped cards that the plan made. The plan requires appellate fact finding, which is the link to the DA, which was the link to the DA that was largely done below, because our evidence indicates that the nature of standing requires it, which is something that they just have no answer to. Exceptions to vest, which is really the only other argument they can go for, other than nonsensical definitions of resolved and should that do not assume the mandate of this resolution. Exceptions to vest means that the state can impair them in cases where the rights already exist. The point of the counterplan is that the legal right assigned by the plan does not exist in the world of the counterplan. It is only a right that can be denied in the context of appellate courts. It means that even if they are right, that vested rights, whatever that means, can be impaired by whatever judicial thing, whatever, that is irrelevant to the mandate of the counterplan, because the counterplan does not give a legal right. The counterplan does not vest a right. The counterplan grants one, and it grants one in a limited set of circumstances, and they have not one that the circumstances that the plan is allowed to, the plan grants a right to, are limited. They have one that maybe the right is limited, not the circumstances in which it exists, which means even if it can be denied in certain circumstances, those circumstances are not part of the mandate of the plan. They're a consequence of the plan, and that is not a basis for competition, because the plan text is the basis for competition per their textual competition arguments. But this also does not answer our argument that rights are not even created by the counterplan, which is done below. There's no new 2AR explanation. I did that above. The Chevron argument is dumb. It is dropped that the counterplan is narrowly about fact-finding. Even if Chevron is dead, if agencies are fine and doing great, our 1NC evidence indicates that if there's risk of counterplan solvency, any risk is enough, because the 1NC card is about agency flexibility. It says they can still exist in their narrow level of expertise, but like, doesn't really matter. All this like business about AFF ground, NEG ground, whatever, irrelevant. We are winning. The counterplan competes. 1, function. Largely done above, the counterplan does not grant a right to standing. 2, we are winning textually. Legal rights is a word in the plan text. They have one definition of it. It is aggressively negative. It is a word in the plan text. It is not a word in the counterplan text, and it alters the way that the right can be enforced. I want to just like to take a second. I'm going to read you the 1AR card again, because I want to make this explicitly and expressly as clear as I possibly can. 1AR card. They read 2 cards. First, Pioli. Definition of vest as being an immediate right distinguished from a future right. Counterplan is a future right, not an immediate right. This is in line with our argument. Wood's card about vested rights having exceptions. Counterplan does not vest rights. Who cares? Stabler card, court defined a legal right as a right that can be legally enforced. The right the counterplan grants cannot be legally enforced in appellate courts. The one the plan does can. This is our argument again. And the Martin card is like this, turns counterplan solvency. They just describe Article 3 standing, something the counterplan grants in the tribunals relevant for the counterplan solvency, but not relevant for plan solvency. And we are certainly winning that legal rights must be granted in all circumstances in the context of administrative tribunals, because they have no argument about why the plan's legal right can be, like, maybe their arguments prove legal rights can be granted to a limited set of entities. They are not winning that the plan's legal right can be granted to in a limited set of circumstances, which is what our argument is, and it's why we've defined legal right as the basis for competition. Yeah, like K, perm, test of competition, it's conditional, not going for it. Who cares?
128 star prep.
happens is it changes the way that the law operates in every provision. It says, unlike perfect competition, we need to be altered in order to have we need to have legal rights or duties. Very clear that this is a good example. What are you going to be part of? First of all, the starting that expand especially the rights of the future solvents are basis all of their something that is made where they are going to the board who have to hear legislative grant, so it is particularly probably bad accidents now need to be involved with the being just that it's not okay, I got the application stuff and it's really formal. So what do we do? That means more information is what you got in the event that or the tax meeting that the allocation of these
He said that I get to. Because it doesn't make sense.
Advantage 2, the public trust counterplan, then the fact-finding counterplan. Okay. All three judges good. Okay. If you thought that any part of this debate was blip or late break, you should know it's because of the educational bastardization the process counterplans create in our sacrosanct activity. I'm going to briefly extend the affirmative because of their competition arguments relies upon a standing distinction that creates a deficit. You should justify this in the Juilliard because our comparative deficits on case about the plan creating certainty are equally deficits of the counterplan because they cannot solve impact extrapolation was clearly in the 1R and the 2NR has miscalculated what their win condition is in this debate. There are two possible half ballots. One is that we will win competition that the plan is not competitive, but secondly is that we will win a deficit that comparatively the counterplan is less certain or does not do standing in the world of the counterplan, which means that it cannot solve any of the affirmative. Their 2NR is way too short. Dismiss multiple of these half ballots, which means that you should put the threshold for a solvency deficit on the floor because they've spent all their time ranting slowly about competition and have miscalculated that the counterplan is less certain than the affirmative plan. Now, energy independence, with the axis of energy independence cause extinction, it results in wars that outweigh the 2NR's blippy characterization. You should only evaluate impacts based on what the 2NR said. Financial crisis, things like climate change are all under-evaluated at the top of the flow and do not have external impacts, but energy independence from the 1R does. It results in global wars that cause competition for resources internationally. Oil wars go global and involve major powers like the United States, Russia, and China that go nuclear because they have an incentive to launch conflicts for resources because it is existential for their countries. Now, the counterplan, the PTZ counterplan, they have dropped a permutation here, a permutation to the counterplan without the ban, the plan plank. You should ask yourself what the impact is to any severance or competition argument. This might seem blippy or ridiculous, but who cares? They have dropped a permutation. You would not vote for this in any other context. If the 1R said the words permutation do both on a criticism and the 2NR does not respond to it, it doesn't matter if it does not include a shields the link argument because they do not have a reason as to why it would link to that benefit or anything else. Permutation do the counterplan without the ban, the plan plank obviously results in us doing the counterplan. There's no impact to this being unjustifiable, which means that you should automatically vote affirmative if you conclude that it was on the flow in the 1R. Either way, this is the permutation that we are going for, so we will win that it is competitively legitimate. Anyway, go to the counterplan now. First, at the top, the counterplan is not competitive. The permutation on the other plan should make this pretty conclusive. Their argument is a distinction between legal rights, but we have read definitions that directly respond to their arguments. The first, that you might think this is silly, but the plain text does not say standing, which means that all of their distinctions must be predicated on function. The standing itself is not defined in the context of legal right. We have read a Stabler evidence that says that it only requires legal enforcement, which means that the plan just requires enforcement. We have also read a piece of evidence that says that vested rights can result in exemptions. The Woods evidence loses Kentucky this debate because it results that in a form of list of vested rights there can include exemptions. It means that the permutation means that the affirmative would vest those legal rights and then allow those exemptions in the court. It means that it is a mandate of the plan that textually the counterplan and the plan are not distinct from one another. A couple of arguments that the negative makes here. The first is that our evidence says that once
rights are vested, they can be inferred, but however, our evidence textually defines legal rights and says that they are something that can intrinsically include exemptions because of the state's apparatus powers. That means that there is no textual distinction because the play and the counterpoint. Secondly, is that they say that vest does not modify any of their legal rights arguments, but they have miscalculated that the Woods evidence also equilaterally defines legal vested rights. It might not say the word legal, but they're not creating a distinction based on those two things. Either way, we have read a piece of Stabler evidence that says that legal rights just require enforcement in some context, which means that any of their competition arguments do not make sense in this arena. All of the arguments on how the counterpoint functionally competes does not matter because they have said that textual competition is what is best. So we are only going to win if the counterpoint is not textually competitive. All of their arguments on vested rights not being in the counterpoint text do not matter because they are in the plan text. And additionally, all of our definitions prove that the counterpoint's mandate, as per its text, is not distinct from the 1AC, which means it is not equally competitive. All the rights about legal rights not existing in the world of the counterplan just means that the enforcement arguments from our competition above apply because the mandate of the counterplan nor the plan creates competitiveness. But secondly is the deficit portion of where we win this debate. If it is true that the counterplan does not create a legal right and that standing can be denied in the fact-finding portions of the counterplan, that it means that it does not solve any of the affirmative. The 1ER has read a piece of defense to the internal net benefit, and they have just decided to only go for competition. Serious miscalculation here because there was a deficit and an impact in the 1ER. The counterplan does not solve. The margin evidence says that in order for you to assert standing, i.e. nature's interest in the world of the plan, then you have to be able to have standing. If that can be impaired or denied in the world of the counterplan, that does not create certainty for the oil and gas industries. This was justified because the 1ER has inserted highlights of 1AC evidence to say that certainty is necessary. That works like this. In the status quo, human injury is what is justified suits. It means that people will go to court and say, hey, this fracking operation destroys my aesthetic interest in looking at this natural beauty. That is terrible for businesses because it sets the bar at the floor. However, in the world of the affirmative, it instead gives standing to natural entities, which means they would only outweigh economic interest, would result in total extinction of wildlife. We have conceded that there's no impact to any of those things, which means that it is only a case of business interest at the end of this debate. The counterplan does not result in legal enforcement because it does not take away from those human injury cases. If standing can be denied in the world of the counterplan, as per our definition that says in order for standing to exist, you have to assert the interest of the parties themselves, not the people that they can just automatically assert. It means that standing has to be in nature's interest. If the counterplan does not do that, it does not solve any of the affirmative case. If any of this 2AR you think is late breaking, then you shouldn't just check out on it because they have not answered this deficit. It was conceded even if there was one word in the 1ER that traces this to the 2AR. An entire ballot is justifiable on these arguments because they have chose to only extend competition in the 2NR. It outweighs the internal net benefit. I'm going to do defense here. One is that energy independence is the only thing that has an existential impact attached to it. The clear evidence says that it causes global nuclear war, financial collapse, healthcare crisis. What the fuck does that even mean? They have no extinction impact that is tied to regulatory governance failures. The top of the 2NR just says a bunch of Kentucky buzzwords, which are going to lose to our Kansas backfiles oil impacts because they actually have words that are highlighted to say consequences will happen if we do not create certainty for the oil and gas industry. We have a couple of pieces of defense here trying to benefit. One is that agencies are fucked in the status quo. It means that they will not defer to them, and it creates regulatory governance failures. The impact is inevitable in the status quo or in the world of the counterplan, which means that all their impacts are inevitable. The court is standing doctrine and Chevron is in disarray. Even if the counterplan is about a very limited part of agency deference, that obviously means that in the broad scheme of things, agencies will still create regulatory failures. The 2NR did not say. Yeah, that's whatever. It's defense step. Okay, yeah. The 2NR also has not said the word severance, moving target, or any theoretical objection to the counterplan that was on the perm that was on the other counterplan. Or even to do the counterplan.
Like, what is the impact to concluding the counterplan competes? Like, there's not an impact to concluding due to counterplan in the next one.
Sure. Cards, yes, no, yes, okay. Oh, sorry, you're good. Good.
Can you put me on the
Can you do that?
Can I just do it after all?
Yeah.
I'm doing it.
It does then.
How that where the left all the way from the war, we know that the US and Russia are the two largest countries, the two largest countries in the world, and the war between that will be very, very low. It will be very, very big, very likely, absolutely, to be limited, especially the traffic, now we're going to try to plan there are permutations to go to that, and power plant plants not be able to have it, how it can even, or they are already not, that we need to go out, because AI, right, will be developed, that AI will develop without running, and then it causes jurisdictional ones, which we often see out. Okay, I think that's what I'm doing about the world, that is not far, a lot of it's involved, like it's really about the Lord, my personally organic the terms made for you, but all big question of whether or not the word have a consistent basis for interpretation. They're ultimately not for something. For the human behavior is not good method of really AI accountable. That is false. Ask corporate methodology. There's three operating forms of intent. Do not have intent either. The knowledge or even any way of AI. The way the legal function.
Would you cut this guy? Would you not this guy? Oh, shit.
No, you're good. If that was actually check. Yes. Oh my gosh. Tacos and churros.
AFDOC set.
Hey. Wait, David, can you just forward the change in Skype?
Yeah. What's your email?
The stream didn't crash this time. So.
We have one, but I shouldn't.
We are ready to be slow, how many times the formative and useful structure of our current law is used to interfere in roles, but there's nothing that can be back to keep the relationship between practice and law. People will realize the law simply requires thinking of the opportunity that all citizens will ultimately feel all the rights that they talk about until reconsider not the most that are actually talking about. Certain different kind of different conversations, there are different still exist what they do for the relationship that actually like the kind of relationship have to be anything, what I want. That has nothing to do with the things, they do nothing to do with the things of sex that has nothing to do with that like they are having a mental position on that group, they have no mechanism to figure out position of purpose to be able to prove how do they recognize the violence that ultimately happens like found that because they can do something that they want to make specifically the law, not person, not this, not person, practically ultimately means that they still re-relocate the city when capitalism that is like practically re-relocate, they just don't release the law and that fact is not the world, how the world maintains itself. They have how will responses to our examples, this is not any new argument being unlocked. They are an answer, although I know that the rectified violence that not having to offer reflection, which is reflection to the things not just being killed, it doesn't mean that you can give them a balance of the reflection, or if I'm not just no. Okay. Well, I will back I don't. Yeah, I'm not thinking about it. How do we let the woman yeah, I know that they have no definition of resolving conflicts without arguing over the problem, all the different people examples that we give in the NLP, etc. After we check out these three groups of the elements, they're very real life. Other than the specifying that they have outside the fact that they just reflect, which is reflecting to go back to our big deal with people are getting called you're having to see that not just the individual, you have to do anyone here who is backing up that specific description who has to be on the actual negative relationship and relationship and not the system was here all the time. What is he saying? Only in a relationship with God, not in our relationship with Jesus, and in our relationship with the house of the crazy world. Sociality, which is the business, and the argument, reflection is always with the practice like crazy individual. This is a ultimately in over here, the act was not too close to the side of the gas, but they internally to all of our projects is generating information in order to actualize the general price. General price is usually no payment to that whole. The more people that participate in this price, the more effective it is. In order to do what happens in policy, it actually requires non-black people to participate. If you get away the entirety of the application, you need to ask yourself, how does the argument say what the thing does of the application is not control? You need to ask yourself, literally, if it's not a party homeowner, how does it do a general price? Is it black people general price? In which case, it does it people go back to this, so you have to bring this act and give alternatives. They also conceded to all our arguments why Palestinians all there is good. Their best argument are why black Palestinians get overlooked and black people our answer to this is not that, it's a single person, but that there are material benefits that black people gain from the abolition of Israel, which is literally great to stand. I like the impact that result in personal religion over here with these black people have more experience from the abolition of Israel and that they also need to use the question of the debate. Use the question that the way out this time why are you coordinators on those non-black people? You don't vote today, it's all they do in office. There is no way to fill that for black people. There's other ways to operate for non-black people that can't also work that out under it. But after the general election, the election period was the very people want to vote. That's not the rules that the intention of the that exactly what happens with those nominations. That's the deal that you genuinely did happen. That's the whole way of talking how to solve the general election. You must all find things that have non-black people participate, because otherwise, white and non-black people just are going to business as usual, and people are working with these capital still in the process of it. You cannot solve climate change. Straight through the thing outweighs. You cannot solve any of the climate rationality without understanding the way in which the punchline you get for the first time climate change. The whole thing called lowering consumption. Everything you do, everybody has to work through the zero price, the running capital consumption. Go first, I don't have to do it. It's in the way they go, I play the capital they also have to contest this. Our argument is not labor extraction. Our argument is that American middle society is about food exploitation and individuals. Their impact on the also the way we like people are working factor labor, but after unemployment, we negotiate on their labor, we think that everything on my personality. But allows for different that actually is really not something about the politics. The reason that the general price is so good is not actually without coalition. You have to mind yourself is that, it means that if you vote negative, that doesn't line and those or why they're going to go and I'll give you right on my people, still exist in the status quo. Now, the status basically the whole major argument about how the market goes to be, their argument is that it's not but this is wrong. You do not pass a negative value without saying it must move around. This requires punishing people like Allison and David and Longy, who there's only one black person on the team. The team that all those teams who lose to these arguments and regardless of what black argument or that's what they can afford, they all lose on each other's arguments. Look, you can vote out on the vote, you can reach out to that. If they not articulate what voting next month, it's all relationality. If it's just that how they do that, and the app does that, but if the pick also does the app, then either it does that as well, or they don't do the app, and the app doesn't outweigh because it's still all the impact. But it doesn't turn the app. They have to articulate the impact algorithm is not. No one can explain why their impact outweighs the impact of the app. They must articulate why something is bad, but not why it outweighs the impact. I think that way that you improve things and do that work. Another one of them is it's good for non-black people and they still work with the most common ladder. It is allowed for non-black people to negotiate a little away. They also do two issues with good on the they give that black people to negotiate a little away.
All right, folks, we have a decision. Congratulations to both teams on a really, really good tournament so far. The decision is a 2-1 for the negative from Kentucky. Congratulations. I sat, I'll go first. I voted AFF to vest legal rights in nature to be named in and have injury weight in lawsuits. Ultimately, I thought the AFF just won the certainty solvency deficit for the fact-stripping counterplan. I think the counterplan does not vest a legal right in nature, but grants nature a right to be named and have injury weighed in limited circumstances. Standing in particular is important to ensure natural interests are weighed in cases of genuine environmental threat to an ecosystem, rather than simply weighing aesthetic or trivial cases that activist groups are using now. Without leasing certainty for the BLM, leases will be withdrawn and investments in coal dry out, preventing energy independence culminates in nuclear war. This really just comes down to 2-hour time allocation for me. I think you're clearly demonstrated the competitiveness of the counterplan, to me at least. I think you could have accomplished what you did in the 2-hour is about 2 minutes rather than 5 minutes of you just really clearly identifying the competitive foundations of your counterplan versus the plan, which was like really clear and really awesome debating and really gets you a high point or a low point win for the app. The extension of the internal net benefit and the responses to the app's 2 1AR cards, I think, are just too shallowly explained in the 2-hour for me, almost to the point where I'm not sure if like if I would be able to explain the internal net benefit without looking back at the cards. I'm not sure exactly what the internal link between the regulatory echo chamber or the agency echo chamber, the regulatory dysfunction and extinction. So the NEG just spent a minute or so clearly explaining a little bit more of the Gorod and Wildermuth and Steinman card that were awesome from the 2NC about how current fact-finding procedures result in arbitrary decisions and bad results, and how the counterplan would ensure judicial clarity, then I'd easily vote NEG in this debate. I'm very sympathetic to the 2NR arguing that I shouldn't give the 2AR credit for blowing up random solvency deficits because it would screw over time allocation and generally be unfair. There are just two reasons why I feel comfortable giving the 1AR just enough credit for the 2AR's extrapolation. One is it's just attached to that Marshall card and that other card that I forgot that was read in the 1AR. And then two, certainty is kind of like a core internal link to the entire injury advantage. I think a lot of the 2AR is a logical extrapolation from that evidence and the core story of the second advantage. So that's really how I saw it, purely time allocation thing for me. And that's how I just pulled the trigger in this thing.
I think that the counterplan is competitive and that they won a small risk of the net benefit, but bigger than a risk of solvency deficit. So competition stuff first. Functionally is where I started. I think we all agree textually it's not the word legal. So the thing I'm trying to figure out is what is the allowed amount of exceptions in the context of legal rights as it relates to standing, and does any exemption mean that it is not a legal right? There are two kind of like small frustrations I had that made me just read the cards and try to figure out what I thought was the truth. The first is like, by the end of the debate, there's not really any normative debating from either side in terms of like standards. Why should we prefer a card that says legal rights versus one that says vested rights? Should I care about precision? Does that shape research and ground? So I think you both need some like, this is why when you have two cards that say opposite things, you should vote our way. And the second was that like, a lot of the cards are talking about things in different contexts. So for example, like you can create rights from statutes, you can also create rights from the Constitution. Some cards in this debate are like executive power or judicial power is vested and cannot be messed with or have any exemption to, whereas other cards are about property rights. And I think if everyone was just like, this is what your card is about, this is what our card is about, this is why, at least in the context of standing, the context of the right that is being discussed matters, I would have had a lot of easier time resolving it. But absent that, I just read the cards, tried to figure out what I thought was true, and came down their way for a couple of reasons. So I think Lewis, which is one of their cards, is the best card on describing standing in the context of legal rights. It's really the only card that says standing and legal rights in the same article. And it says that to sue the government, you either have it or you do not have it. It's a legal right. The counterplan eventually grants something that allows them to bring a suit forward. And the question I need answered from you all is like, what is that? Is that considered standing? Is that a legal right? Like if they appear in court, does that mean that the counterplan is done standing? I don't know, but they have read a card that's like, our thing would allow them to be in court eventually. It's not considered a legal right by this person, and it does allow suits to happen. I think that the second card that matters is the Walker card, and it says that at minimum needs to be immediately fixed. There was a line in the 2NR that's like, even if you have some confusion, their thing is immediate. It's now because they said legal right. We have a card that defines that as happening now, whereas our thing is at least in the future. They don't get standing until they do the magistrate thing. So there's at least not standing now or until the thing happens. So that's not the same as the app. The other things that kind of matter is, so in reading your cards, stapler is like right after you stop highlighting, but cannot be lawfully denied or interfered with, which I think the counterplan does. It does lawfully deny and interfere with. You all should say that. Like if there was just more debating and everyone was very clear on, what standards matter, I'm not sure I'd read through like the full text of every card, but like the card does help you if you had pointed that out. Woods, your other card is also about property rights, which I don't know if that matters in the context of legal standing. So I think you really need a card that's like legal standing. It says legal rights. It says exceptions. That would help a lot. As it was, I decided to play competitive. On substance, I don't think you included enough for me to think that there was a real deficit. So the two things that I had on the flow that in some way resulted to a deficit was the first thing you said, you were like counterplan solves better is wrong at the top of the flow when you started doing overview stuff. And then you're like, it says that agencies and courts need to act together, which is a reason to do both is better. That's like this is the reason the counterplan maybe doesn't solve better and the permutation is good. It's not like the counterplan does not solve. The second thing is this card on the competition debate that's like, if their thing doesn't give the right, then eventually it gets solved because there's no standing. And I do think that eventually it gives them certainty in court. Like it says, if you go through with the special magistrate thing, you do eventually have access to the court. And I think that is certain. It does add an additional barrier, but it's not contingent on like the outcome of the fact finding. It just is like, until you have done the fact finding, you cannot go to the court. And I think that the counterplan, at least relative to the SWO, is definitely like more clear for businesses. They do have to go through this additional hurdle or whatever, but I think that eventually cases go through, and so I have to consider the magnitude of the net benefit. Candace, you might be a little frustrated because like they didn't say a ton of the stuff about solvency, but I just don't think the 1AR said enough about any of this for me to have expected Kentucky to have repeated all of this stuff. It's like kind of just gut judgment call. I think people are going to split on how they evaluated that. But if you had said a little bit more on the 1AR on some of those things, I maybe would not have like read their text 4 or 5 to figure out if it's certain enough. But in the end, I think it is at least better than this one. For the net benefit, I give them some credit for the 1NR card. Like it does say a little bit more than the 2AR gives it credit for. Like you cited things like financial crisis and healthcare, and you're like, what the fuck is that? But like ignore the part where it says nuclear attacks and like we need resilience to stop, nukes from killing us. In your impact card, it doesn't say the word existential. Like it doesn't say civilization will not survive. It says nuclear war as well. It's like the impact card said nukes and said some other stuff. So I think there is net benefit. You obviously don't have any way to solve it, and the only thing was like Chevron means like maybe agencies screwed now, but I agreed with the frame that it's like, once we fund impact, any risk that the counterplan can solve, it solves. And means try or die for counterplan and not. The last thing was the other part. So the like thing on the other page. For starters, like I want perm text. I think that the thing that I would strike out is just exclude the phrase deny standing on appeal and then keep the things like on the ground in the thing. But in my mind, Kentucky has agreed with your competition standard for counterplans, which is that it needs to be functionally and textually competitive. They do not extend anything about textual competition, and they have only gone for argument that the counterplan meets both things, which is the standard that you set up. To me, that establishes what permutations are allowed to do and what permutations can get away with. I think you could either mess with, being intrinsic or separate textually or functionally, but not do it for both. And you clearly textually sever under this permutation. You don't include the phrase legal. You said do the counterplan, which did not include legal. And then functionally, based on the way that I read the cards about legal rights being immediately fixed, I think that it's also functionally separate. You were like, what's the impact to severance? Like, who cares? And the Twinsie said it's a voting issue, it is unfair, it's cheating, it causes conditionality. The 1AR didn't answer any of that or address it. So I don't think the 2AR needs to say that again. And once I decide it severs both functionally and textually, it's cheating now.
I do think the very top of the counterplan extension in 2NR at least describes what the counterplan does, and I think that includes the argument that fact-finding, if it's essentially a failure at the appellate level, that is an argument that goes against the affirmative's claim of certainty, because if the facts are problematic, it results in problematic decisions. And I don't think that component of the counterplan has really been dealt with either by the 1AR or even the 2AR, because facts ultimately determine the quality of the decisions that occur. So it's not, so when you say standing is essential, like you're not dealing with what happens if the facts are ultimately problematic because appellates are really bad at doing those types of stuff, that they just err in the direction of the agencies. Then, I mean, that means that the BLM in this instance wants to avoid or prevent oil and gas extraction that can occur. Now, clearly the 2AR doesn't go that far in saying oil and gas, but I think once the basic claim of fact finding being problematic at the appellate level, after of course, the case goes upwards, then you got to deal with that part of it. And I mean, otherwise, again, agree with the frustration. 2NR should be better at extending the rest of the counterplan and everything else. But absent dealing with that core aspect of the counterplan, I think that's enough in terms of meaning that even the affirmative has some problems. So. In terms of the standing side of things, also agree in terms of the argument that essentially standing eventually happens. It just ensures that quality facts are then found. It seems like it's sufficient. Vast majority of the debate was on whether or not the permutation and the competition side of things, but I'll deal with the impact before I get to that. Impact, I think the administrative state is pretty well affected. I could give more defensive weight in terms of the extension. Obviously the negative should be dealing with that. But your evidence doesn't say that the administrative state no longer functions. It just means that they're entirely constrained. And those agencies are still going to have things that are strictly defined by legislative statutes that they have to deal with. And their argument, as Honestly, the cross-examination, I think, of the 2 and C was probably the most revealing about how the net benefit works. So maybe this harms you a little bit by providing more speech time to be able to clarify how this impact operates. But just the echo chamber results in bad administration, which means that they ultimately just fail. As being a claim, I don't think it's really well dealt with. So even if it's largely constrained, maybe that affects their ability to stretch the administrative state to deal with things that are not contained strictly within legislation, but we still have some legislation. Administration's still going to be there. They need to do things. There's still a risk of an impact in my mind. Absolutely agree. Key card for me was legal rights. I think really more time just needs to be spent on legal rights. Does not necessarily guarantee standing in all cases. If anything, the evidence itself, I think, was from 1962 or 27. I don't remember what the date is. But when I read the title of the article, it's about kind of the misapplication of the legal right, which in my mind seems to be, I mean, it's probably not an intent to define, but more a description of how it happens at times. I just don't think, I think more time needs to be about how to actually interpret it. Otherwise, I think more AFF theory arguments about how the plan should be interpreted and how words ultimately should be interpreted. The plan is not either the legislation or the actual judicial decisions in terms of establishing this stuff. It's entirely incoherent that a legal right is going to be irrevocable in all potential instances, because it doesn't make any sense in the context of how the Constitution even operates, because you have to balance various rights against each other. There's no such thing as just a universal right that outweighs everything else. And so I think the counterplan is largely incoherent. Alternatively, I also don't think that the counterplan is really correct. I think a perm just to add in the magistrate fact-finding side of things in addition to the plan would probably suffice. I don't necessarily think the standing aspect of it is true in the truthiness of the counterplan. So I think they're probably misrepresenting that portion of the counterplan, or at least I'm not smart enough to really figure it out. And so spending a little bit more time, I think, on that side would be fine. Other arguments, you don't have a right to the counterplan, you can have a right to the disad would be fine. But ultimately, I think perm to the counterplan would have been a better approach, because even though you're right that you don't have standing in the plan text, once I determine that legal right in the plan text does mean standing because of that card that they read, then you allow for standing.
That makes sense. So the 1AR, we used a handful of prep just trying to figure, we obviously did just something like appellate that, whatever fuck Kentucky's counterclaim was gonna break. So the 1AR was at a bridge of whether to commit to competition and do more on the deficit, or read a disset. The jurisdiction stripping thing, I don't know if you have thoughts whether they worked or not. At first we were really confident they did, and then as we thought about it a little more, and Dave was no, we were uncertain whether to hedge the bet on it. But in reality, it seems like it would strip jurisdiction away from the court and shift it to an agency appellate. But we weren't sure. So was that jurisdiction stripping? Yes.
You just need kind of an argument about how. I mean, again, I'm not that smart when it comes to this stuff. But how do we know the magistrate isn't just going to be a type of agency or a type of capture, political capture? That whoever this magistrate is not going to be objective. That it essentially allows the Trump appointees to select whoever they want to be able to find the facts that they want, and that is worse. I think that would be a better direction for you than this argument that you're currently describing.
I thought that JC was using effective language of that, unaccountable, appointed, somebody, that business leaders would have they then to set really good precedent. But yeah, I think that basically captured an effective solvency argument.
Reading the JC card, I think if you don't have a better card or a ton of spin explaining why it's applicable, it would probably take it down this way. So one of the unhighlighted parts are depriving a court the power to hear a case entirely, what this person thinks is stripping. And I think they would have been they hear the case entirely. It's just they have to do this fact-finding thing first. And so I don't think it would have worked necessarily. I thought that like maybe just a little more on solvency deficits or like identifying that the thing would take longer, fact finding is slow, it's complicated, who knows what would happen. It certainly doesn't result in as much certainty in the 1AR would have set you up maybe okay for substance. It seemed like you almost in the 1AR we're not sure how much substance you wanted versus how much perm. There's like this go to the K thing. It like kind of helped you because I sat here and thought about substance, but it doesn't seem like that was the plan. So I maybe just take more breath. Try to find a couple things you can say that are basic, just like delay, it's complicated, costly. See if you have any cards that are even close.
The other issue is so like originally there were cards from like backfile cards that are just like agencies are politicized now, don't like for like XYZ reason, like I'm trying to figure out Trump winning or whatever. I guess my qualm was just like I figured the 2-hour answer would be just like those are about agencies broadly, appellate judges / like the people that are making the decisions are experts. I guess like would you have been fine with just like generic agency cards or just like agencies are politicized and like now, or do you think a 2-hour was just like not about appellate court like appellate fact finding?
So the more they say that, the less I understand how it solves other stuff.
Okay.
Like if they're like, our thing is only about this appellate court thing, and there's a suit about nature that happens with our tribunal, I don't particularly understand how it's going to like spill over to creating good precedent for other agencies or other types of suits in a way that solves effective regulation. Like, I'd maybe just take that today and be like, okay, no spill over.
That makes sense. Those are thank you so much. Good debate.
I think we're good. Appreciate it.
Good debate.
Thanks, you.
Good debate.